Before he was Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, before he stood beside Queen Marika as the mightiest champion of the Golden Order, before his name became synonymous with divine kingship itself, he was Hoarah Loux, a mortal warrior of savage strength and unrelenting ambition, a chieftain whose bloodlust was so fierce that he required a beast regent, Serosh, bound to his very back to temper his killing instinct, a detail that reveals something profound about the nature of godhood in the lands between. That divinity is not bestowed upon the pure or the noble, but seized by those willing to transform themselves, to sacrifice their very essence, to become something other than what they were born to be. This is the story of that transformation and of the cataclysmic consequences that followed, a saga that spans the entire history of the Erd Tree's dominion, from the blood-soaked conquests that established the Golden Order's supremacy to the apocalyptic civil war that shattered it, from the founding of an empire that would endure for untold centuries to its ultimate collapse into ruin and chaos. It is the story of the first Tarnished, those warriors who fought beside Hoarah Loux in the age of endless war, who were elevated to grace and then stripped of it, banished from the lands between to wander in exile across distant shores, only to be called back centuries later when the world they had built lay broken and their descendants had forgotten their names. It is a story of love and betrayal, of a marriage between warrior and goddess that shaped the destiny of an entire world, of children now born to inherit a golden age who would instead tear it apart, of the terrible price of ambition and the even more terrible price of its fulfillment. It is a story that asks what it means to be chosen, what it means to be cast out, and whether redemption is possible for those who have lost everything, including the very light that once defined their existence. Godfrey's tale is inseparable from the rise and fall of the Golden Order itself, for he was its first champion, the instrument of Marika's will, the conqueror who brought the giants to their knees, who crushed the Stormlord who waged war against every enemy of the Erd Tree until there were no enemies left to fight, and in that final victory found not glory but exile, cast out by the very goddess he had served, his grace stripped away, his name struck from the annals of the faithful. The first, Tarnished, who followed him into that darkness, were not merely soldiers, but the foundation upon which the entire age had been built, veterans of campaigns that had reshaped continents, warriors whose deeds had become legend, and yet they were discarded like broken tools when their purpose had been served, sent beyond the fog to die forgotten in lands that knew nothing of the Erd Tree's light. For centuries they wandered, their descendants multiplying in exile, the memory of their former glory fading with each generation until it became myth, then legend, then barely remembered story, while in the lands between the age they had built continued without them, the Golden Order reaching heights of power and splendor that seemed eternal, unshakable, destined to endure until the end of time itself. But eternity is a lie, and the Golden Order contained within itself the seeds of its own destruction, contradictions, and cruelties that would eventually tear it apart from within. And when the Elden Ring was shattered, when Marika's children went to war against one another in a conflict so devastating that it would come to be known simply as the Shattering, when the lands between descended into an endless twilight of demigods locked in perpetual stalemate, each too powerful to be defeated, but none strong enough to claim ultimate victory. It was then that the call went out across the fog, a summons that reached into distant lands and touched the descendants of those first exiles, the Tarnished, beckoning them home to a world they had never known, to seek the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord, to restore the order that had cast out their ancestors. And among those who answered the call, among the countless Tarnished who would return to die in droves against demigods and dragons and horrors beyond comprehension, there was one who had never truly left, one who had been waiting for this moment since the day of his banishment, one who had spent centuries in exile not as a broken wanderer, but as a conqueror still, waging war in distant lands, building armies, growing stronger, never forgetting what had been taken from him, never ceasing in his determination to return. Godfrey, no longer Elden Lord, but not quite Hoarah Loux either, something between the two, the beast regent Serosh still clinging to his back, though the grace that had bound them was long extinguished, would make his way back to the lands between, not as a supplicant seeking restoration, but as a claimant demanding what was rightfully his, and in his wake would come the truth of what the first Tarnished truly were, not merely exiles or outcasts, but something far more significant, a contingency, perhaps, a plan within a plan, pieces positioned on a board for a game that would not be played for centuries, their banishment not punishment, but preparation for this very moment when the Golden Order would need to be torn down and rebuilt, when the old world would need to die so that a new one could be born. The question of whether Marika intended this from the beginning, whether Godfrey's exile was part of some grand design, or simply the cold pragmatism of a goddess who had no more use for a warrior in an age of peace, is one that echoes through every corner of this story, informing every choice, every betrayal, every moment of violence and tenderness alike. What is certain is that Godfrey's journey from Hoarah Loux to Elden Lord and back again is the spine upon which the entire history of the lands between is built, the through line that connects the age of conquest to the age of ruin, the living embodiment of the cycle of rise and fall that defines the world of Elden Ring. His story encompasses the greatest heights of glory and the deepest depths of loss, the forging of an empire and its ultimate dissolution, the love between mortal and God, and the inevitable tragedy that such love entails. It is a story of fathers and children, of Godfrey's relationship with his sons Godwyn and Morgott and Mog, of the complicated legacy he left them, of how his absence shaped them as much as his presence ever did, of the different paths they would take in response to the void he left behind. It is a story of brotherhood and rivalry among the first Tarn. In the early age of the Erd Tree, before the Golden Order had fully consolidated its dominion over the lands between, a different kind of power was rising from the untamed wilds. This was an era when Marika the Eternal had only recently ascended to godhood, when the Erd Tree itself was still establishing its roots deep into the fabric of reality, and when vast stretches of the realm remained unconquered, ruled instead by tribal warlords, ancient giants, and creatures that predated even the Greater Will's influence. It was during this formative period that a warrior chieftain named Hoarah Loux would emerge from obscurity to reshape the very foundations of the Golden Order. Hoarah Loux was not born into nobility or divine favor. He came from the harsh Badlands, those unforgiving territories where survival demanded strength and cunning in equal measure. As chieftain of a nomadic tribe, he embodied the raw, primal violence that characterized warfare in those brutal times. His people were warriors by necessity, constantly moving across the lands between in search of resources, territory, and glory. They were a tribe defined by their martial prowess, and Hoarah Loux stood as the ultimate expression of their values. He was a man of immense physical power, capable of feats that seemed superhuman even in a world touched by divine forces. Contemporary accounts, preserved in fragments of ancient texts found near the Colosseum ruins, describe him as a giant among men, his frame towering over even the tallest warriors of his time. Under Hoarah Loux's leadership, his tribe began a series of conquests that would fundamentally alter the political landscape of the pre-Golden Order era. These were not the calculated military campaigns that would later characterize his reign as Elden Lord. Instead, they were brutal, direct assaults driven by an almost feral hunger for dominance. Hoarah Loux led from the front, his personal combat abilities often deciding the outcome of battles before they truly began. He wielded his strength not as a tool of statecraft, but as an instrument of pure conquest. Villages fell before his warband, Rival tribes were either absorbed into his growing confederation or annihilated entirely. The lands between in this era were fragmented into countless competing factions, and Hoarah Loux's tribe carved through them like a blade through flesh. What set Hoarah Loux apart from other warlords of his time was not merely his personal strength, though that was considerable, but his ability to inspire absolute loyalty in his followers. His warriors fought with a ferocity that terrified their enemies. They developed a reputation for never retreating, never surrendering, and never showing mercy to those who opposed them. This was not mindless savagery, however. Hoarah Loux possessed a keen tactical mind, understanding how to leverage terrain, how to exploit enemy weaknesses, and how to maintain the morale of his forces, even in the most desperate circumstances. His tribe became known throughout the lands between as an unstoppable force, and their distinctive war cries could send entire armies into panicked retreat. As his territory expanded, so too did the legends surrounding Hoarah Loux himself. Stories spread of how he had defeated a giant bear with his bare hands, strangling the beast in single combat. Other tales spoke of how he had challenged and killed the previous chieftain of his tribe in ritual combat, claiming leadership through the ancient right of strength. Whether embellished or not, these stories served a crucial purpose. They transformed Hoarah Loux from merely a successful warlord into something approaching a mythic figure, a living embodiment of martial supremacy. In the settlements and fortresses scattered across the lands between, his name became synonymous with unstoppable power. This growing reputation eventually reached the ears of Queen Marika the Eternal, who had recently established her divine rule from the foot of the Erd Tree. Marika, having ascended to godhood through means that remained shrouded in mystery and divine mandate, faced a fundamental challenge. She possessed divine authority granted by the Greater Will, that cosmic entity whose two fingers served as intermediaries between the divine and the mortal realm. She controlled the Elden Ring, the manifestation of order itself, which allowed her to shape the fundamental laws of reality within the lands between. Yet divine authority alone was insufficient to truly unify the fractured realm. The lands between were vast, filled with hostile forces that recognized no divine mandate. Giants still ruled their frozen mountaintops. Ancient dragons soared through skies they had claimed since time immemorial. Countless human kingdoms, tribal confederations, and independent warlords maintained their own power bases, indifferent or actively hostile to Marika's claims of universal sovereignty. Marika understood that to transform her divine authority into actual political and military dominance, she required a consort who could serve as the martial complement to her spiritual power. She needed someone who could lead armies, who could inspire fear and loyalty in equal measure, and who possessed the raw strength necessary to crush those who would not bend the knee to the Golden Order. Her attention naturally turned to Hoarah Loux, whose conquests had made him the most formidable military leader in the lands between. Here was a man who had built an empire through personal prowess and tactical brilliance, someone whose very name could shift the balance of power in a conflict. Marika did not simply extend an invitation, however. A goddess does not court a warlord as an equal, and Marika needed to ensure that Hoarah Loux would serve her vision rather than his own ambitions. She dispatched emissaries to his encampment, representatives who carried both offers of alliance and subtle tests of his character. These emissaries were not mere messengers, but powerful figures in their own right, individuals who could assess whether Hoarah Loux possessed not just strength, but the qualities necessary to stand beside a goddess. The historical record, preserved in fragments of Golden Order chronicles, suggests these tests were both diplomatic and martial in nature. One account describes how Marika's emissaries presented Hoarah Loux with a choice between immediate wealth and power, or the promise of something greater but uncertain. Hoarah Loux, demonstrating the strategic thinking that would later define his campaigns, chose the uncertain promise, recognizing that aligning himself with a divine power offered possibilities that mere material wealth could never provide. Another test involved a challenge to single combat against one of Marika's champions, a warrior blessed with incantations drawn from the Erd Tree's golden power. Hoarah Loux accepted without hesitation and emerged victorious, proving that his strength could match even those touched by divine grace. These tests satisfied Marika that Hoarah Loux possessed the qualities she required. He was strong enough to lead her armies to victory. He was intelligent enough to understand the larger strategic picture. He was ambitious enough to desire power, but pragmatic enough to recognize when alliance served his interests better than independence. Most importantly, he demonstrated a willingness to subordinate his own immediate desires to a greater vision, a crucial quality for someone who would serve as consort to a goddess rather than as an independent ruler. The invitation came formally, carried by a procession of Golden Order knights whose armor gleamed with the light of the Erd Tree itself. Hoarah Loux was summoned to the capital, to the very foot of the Erd Tree, to meet with Queen Marika herself. For a tribal chieftain from the Badlands, this represented an almost unimaginable elevation. The Erd Tree was already becoming the center of power in the lands between, a massive golden tree whose roots reached deep into the earth and whose branches seemed to touch the heavens themselves. To be invited into Marika's presence was to be acknowledged as someone worthy of notice by divinity itself. Hoarah Loux accepted the invitation, but this acceptance required a profound sacrifice. He left his tribe, the people he had led to glory and conquest, entrusting their leadership to his most capable lieutenants. This was not abandonment, but rather a transformation. He was leaving behind the life of a nomadic warlord to become something entirely different, something that the lands between had never seen before. He traveled to the Erd Tree, and there, in the presence of Queen Marika the Eternal, he was offered a position that would change the course of history. Marika proposed that Hoarah Loux become her consort, her Elden Lord. This title, Elden Lord, was newly created, a position that would make him Marika's equal in matters of governance and military command, while she retained ultimate spiritual authority as the vessel of the Elden Ring. He would lead her armies in the great wars of unification that she envisioned. He would serve as the mortal face of divine authority, the warrior king who could inspire and command the forces necessary to bring the entire lands between under the Golden Order's dominion. In exchange, he would be granted power beyond anything a mere tribal chieftain could imagine, authority that extended across the entire realm, and a place in history as the first Elden Lord. Hoarah Loux accepted without hesitation, recognizing this as the culmination of everything his conquests had been building toward. Godfrey's strength becomes far more than a military asset. It transforms into a symbol of Marika's divine authority itself, a living embodiment of the Golden Order's power, made manifest in flesh and steel. The people of the lands between begin to see in Godfrey's victories not merely the triumph of one warrior over another, but proof of Marika's right to rule. When he marches into battle beneath the golden banners of the Erd Tree, it is as though the goddess herself strikes down her enemies. This symbolic power reinforces Marika's eternal reign in ways that even the most profound theological arguments could never achieve. The common folk, the nobility, and even the defeated chieftains come to understand that to stand against Godfrey is to stand against the divine order of the world. His presence at Marika's side becomes an unspoken promise, a guarantee that her rule is not merely legitimate, but inevitable, backed by a force of arms that cannot be overcome. From this union of goddess and warrior comes progeny that will shape the future of the lands between for ages to come. Godfrey fathers several children with Marika, demigods born of both divine grace and mortal strength. Among these children One stands above all others in the hearts of the people. Godwyn the Golden, their firstborn son, inherits his mother's divine radiance and his father's noble bearing. From his earliest days, Godwyn displays a temperament that makes him beloved throughout the realm. Where his father is a warrior king, stern and unyielding in battle, Godwyn possesses a warmth and charisma that draws people to him. He becomes known for his kindness, his sense of justice, and his genuine care for the welfare of all who live under the Erdtree's light. The Golden Prince, as he comes to be called, represents the best qualities of both his parents. In him, the people see the promise of a golden age that will extend beyond even Marika and Godfrey's rule. His very existence serves as proof that the union between Goddess and Elden Lord has produced something greater than either could achieve alone, a living symbol of the Golden Order's perfection. The warriors who fight under Godfrey's command become legendary in their own right. These men and women, who will later be known as the Tarnished, are renowned throughout the lands between for their loyalty and martial skill. They are not merely soldiers following orders, but true believers in the cause they serve. Godfrey handpicks many of them himself, recognizing in certain individuals the qualities he values most: courage, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to duty. These warriors come from all corners of the lands between. Some are former rivals who bent the knee after witnessing Godfrey's prowess. Others are common folk who rose through the ranks through sheer determination and skill. What unites them is their absolute devotion to their Lord, and through him to Marika and the Erdtree. In battle, they fight with a ferocity that terrifies their enemies, but they are not mindless berserkers. They are disciplined, organized, and capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers. Their reputation grows with each victory, and soon the mere rumor that Godfrey's Tarnished are marching toward a rebellious province is enough to bring its leaders to the negotiating table. Understanding that strength alone cannot sustain an eternal kingdom, Godfrey establishes a code of honor among the Tarnished. This code emphasizes discipline and service to the Erdtree above all else. It is not enough to be strong or skilled with the blade. A true Tarnished must embody the values of the Golden Order in every action. The code demands respect for one's comrades, mercy toward those who surrender, and absolute obedience to the chain of command. It forbids needless cruelty, the despoiling of holy sites, and any action that might bring dishonor to Marika's name. Godfrey himself serves as the living embodiment of this code. He is fierce in battle but never cruel, demanding but never capricious, powerful but never tyrannical. His warriors strive to emulate him, knowing that to be called Tarnished is to accept a standard of conduct higher than that expected of ordinary soldiers. This code becomes one of Godfrey's most enduring legacies. Long after his battles are forgotten, the principles he instills in his warriors continue to shape the culture of the lands between. Under Godfrey's leadership, the lands between enters an era of relative peace and prosperity. The constant warfare that marked the early days of Marika's reign begins to subside as rival factions are either defeated or integrated into the new order. With the major threats neutralized, Godfrey turns his attention to the work of stabilization. He establishes garrisons in strategic locations throughout the realm, ensuring that any spark of rebellion can be quickly extinguished. He creates supply lines to support these garrisons, fostering trade and communication between regions that had previously been isolated or hostile to one another. The roads become safe for merchants and pilgrims. The fields, no longer trampled by warring armies, yield bountiful harvests. The people, exhausted by generations of conflict, embrace this new era with gratitude. They attribute their newfound security directly to Godfrey's strength and wisdom, and through him, to Marika's divine providence. The Elden Lord becomes not just a warrior, but a statesman, proving that his talents extend far beyond the battlefield. Godfrey oversees the construction of fortifications and monuments throughout the lands between, physical manifestations of Marika's legacy built to endure for eternity. Great castles rise on strategic heights, their walls thick enough to withstand any siege. Watchtowers dot the landscape, allowing Godfrey's forces to maintain constant vigilance against external threats. But these are not merely military installations. They are also works of art designed to inspire awe and reverence. Their architecture incorporates motifs of the Erd tree, with golden inlays and sculptures depicting Marika and her champions. In the capital, Godfrey commissions monuments to commemorate the great victories that brought peace to the realm. These monuments serve a dual purpose. They honor the fallen warriors who gave their lives in service to the Golden Order, and they remind future generations of the cost of that peace. Godfrey understands that memory is a weapon against complacency. By preserving the stories of these battles in stone and gold, he ensures that the people will never forget what was sacrificed to build this age of prosperity. Throughout these years of conquest and consolidation, Godfrey's bond with Marika deepens in ways that transcend their political alliance. They become inseparable partners in both rule and love, a union that defines the character of the age. Marika, for all her divine power and cosmic knowledge, finds in Godfrey something she cannot create through grace or manipulation, a true equal. He does not worship her as the common folk do, nor does he fear her as some of her other servants do. He stands beside her as a partner, offering counsel when asked and support when needed. Their relationship becomes the model for the ideal union in the Golden Order, a perfect balance of strength and wisdom, mortality and divinity. In private moments, away from the throne room and the battlefield, they are simply two souls who have found completion in one another. In public, they present a united front that no enemy can hope to divide. Their love becomes another pillar supporting Marika's reign, proof that even a goddess can find fulfillment in partnership rather than dominion alone. Yet even in this era of relative peace, challenges arise that test Godfrey's mettle. He encounters the Storm Lord, a powerful rival who rules over a domain in the distant reaches of the lands between. The Storm Lord commands the very winds and lightning, wielding elemental forces that make him nearly invincible in his own territory. His people worship him as a god in his own right, and he refuses to acknowledge Marika's supremacy or bend the knee to her golden order. For months, Godfrey attempts to negotiate a peaceful resolution, but the Stormlord's pride proves as immovable as the mountains. Finally, understanding that this challenge cannot be ignored without undermining everything he has built, Godfrey marches to the Stormlord's domain with his most elite warriors. The battle that follows becomes the stuff of legend. The Stormlord unleashes tempests that tear trees from the ground and hurl boulders through the air like pebbles. Lightning strikes the earth with such frequency that the very ground becomes scorched and blackened. Godfrey's warriors fall back, unable to advance against such overwhelming elemental fury. But Godfrey himself presses forward, his axe held high, his determination unshaken. He fights through wind that would knock lesser men from their feet, through rain that blinds and thunder that deafens. The duel between Godfrey and the Stormlord rages for hours, two titans clashing while the elements themselves seem to hold their breath. In the end, it is Godfrey's indomitable will that prevails. He lands a devastating blow that shatters the Stormlord's defenses, and the elemental tyrant falls. With his defeat, the storms cease, and an eerie calm settles over the battlefield. The Stormlord's defeat cements Godfrey's reputation as the greatest warrior of the age. No longer can anyone claim that his victories came from superior numbers or divine intervention alone. He has proven himself capable of overcoming even supernatural forces through sheer skill and determination. The tale of this battle spreads throughout the lands between, growing with each retelling, but never straying far from the truth. for the truth itself is extraordinary enough. Godfrey's victories inspire tales of his heroism that are passed down through generations. Bards compose songs about his battles. Scholars write histories documenting his campaigns. Parents tell their children stories of the great Elden Lord who brought peace to a war-torn world. These tales serve not merely as entertainment, but as moral instruction, teaching the values that Godfrey embodied: courage, honor, loyalty, and service to a cause greater than oneself. Yet beneath the gilded armor and ceremonial crown, Godfrey begins to feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing down upon him with crushing force. The burden of maintaining Marika's vision for the lands between proves far heavier than any weapon he wielded in battle. Where once he needed only to identify an enemy and strike them down, now he must navigate the treacherous currents of divine politics, balance the competing interests of the demigods, and enforce laws that sometimes contradict his own warrior's sense of honor. Every decision he makes ripples outward through the Golden Order, affecting countless lives in ways he struggles to fully comprehend. The simplicity of combat, where right and wrong were determined by strength and courage, gives way to endless councils where truth becomes malleable and justice bends to serve the needs of the Erdtree. Godfrey's connection to his warrior roots grows increasingly strained as he embraces his role as Elden Lord more fully. The courtiers of Leyndell expect him to speak in measured tones, to consider every word for its political implications, to dress in finery rather than practical armor. They recoil when he suggests settling disputes through trial by combat, a method that served him well in the wilds. His instincts, honed through decades of survival and warfare, now seem crude and unsuitable for the refined atmosphere of the capital. The beast regent Serosh, still clinging to his back, serves as a constant reminder of the savage power he must keep restrained. Where once Serosh helped him channel his rage in battle, now the beast's presence feels like a living symbol of everything he must suppress to fulfill his duties. The lords and ladies of the court whisper that Godfrey has been tamed, domesticated like a wild animal, brought to heel, and though they mean it as praise for his civilized transformation, each such comment cuts deeper than any blade. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even the Erdtree's light seems dimmed, he secretly longs for the simplicity and freedom of his former life as Hoarah Loux. He remembers the wind on the open plains, the honest exhaustion after a hard-fought battle, the camaraderie of warriors who valued deeds over words. As Hoarah Loux, his purpose was clear and his path straightforward. He fought, he conquered, he survived. There were no debates about the theological implications of his actions, no concerns about how his choices might affect the stability of the Golden Order centuries hence. He thinks of the tribal fires where he once sat with his fellow warriors, sharing meat and mead, telling stories of their victories without needing to couch every tale in diplomatic language. He recalls the satisfaction of testing himself against worthy opponents, of feeling his muscles burn with exertion, of knowing that his survival depended entirely on his own skill and strength. Now, surrounded by luxury and ceremony, he feels trapped in a golden cage of his own making. Marika, whose divine perception extends far beyond mortal senses, begins to sense his inner conflict. She notices how his eyes drift toward the horizon during state ceremonies, how his hand instinctively moves to his axe when stressed rather than seeking counsel from advisors, how he grows quiet and withdrawn after particularly lengthy sessions of courtly business. At first, she dismisses these signs as natural adjustments to his new role, the growing pains of a warrior learning statecraft. But as months stretch into years, the pattern becomes undeniable. She begins to question his loyalty and commitment to her cause, wondering whether the man she elevated to stand beside her truly shares her vision for an eternal golden order. Does he understand the magnitude of what they are building together, Or does he see it merely as another conquest to be completed before moving on to the next challenge? Her doubts gnaw at her, particularly as she contemplates the long ages ahead. If Godfrey's heart remains in the past, can he truly be the partner she needs to shape the future? Godfrey's relationship with Marika becomes increasingly strained as tensions rise over their differing visions for what comes next. Marika speaks of eternity, of a perfect order that will endure unchanging through countless generations. She envisions a world where conflict has been eliminated, where every being knows their place within the grand design, where the Erd Tree's golden light banishes all shadow and uncertainty. But Godfrey, despite his best efforts to embrace this dream, cannot fully abandon his belief that struggle and challenge are what give life meaning. He argues, carefully at first, and then with growing passion, that a world without worthy opponents to test oneself against would breed weakness and stagnation. He suggests that the Tarnished and other warriors need not just training exercises but real battles, genuine threats to overcome. Marika counters that such thinking belongs to the barbaric past they have transcended, that true strength lies in maintaining peace rather than seeking war. Their private chambers, once filled with the warmth of shared ambition, now echo with heated debates that neither can win. They begin to speak past each other, each convinced of their own righteousness, neither willing to fully compromise. He begins to withdraw from courtly life, finding excuses to absent himself from the endless ceremonies and councils that consume Leyndell's days. Instead, he spends more time in the training grounds, working personally with the Tarnished warriors who followed him from the Badlands. Here, among the clash of steel and the honest sweat of combat, he feels more himself than in any throne room. He drills them relentlessly, pushing them to their limits and beyond, perhaps trying to recapture through their struggles the sense of purpose he once felt. He also spends long hours alone, walking the walls of Leyndell at night, or riding out into the countryside, reflecting on his past and questioning the path that brought him here. The other Elden Lords in history, those who came before in previous ages, did they feel this same disconnect? Or was he uniquely unsuited for the role, a warrior trying to play at being something he could never truly become? These solitary reflections offer no easy answers, only deeper questions about identity and destiny. Godfrey's warriors, the Tarnished who have served him since his days as Hoarah Loux, notice his growing discontent, with sharp eyes trained to read their lord's moods. They see how the fire in his eyes dims during formal occasions, how his shoulders seem to bear an invisible weight that no amount of physical strength can lift. Whispers spread through their ranks, quiet conversations in barracks and training yards where they question their own loyalty to the Erd Tree. They followed Godfrey because he was the strongest, because his vision of conquest and glory resonated with their own warrior spirits. But this new role, this position, as enforcers of an eternal peace, sits uneasily with men and women who defined themselves through battle. Some begin to wonder aloud whether they have traded their freedom for golden chains, whether serving the Erd Tree truly honors the warrior's path or betrays it. The seeds of doubt, once planted, prove difficult to uproot. Marika, whose network of spies and informants extends throughout Leyndell and beyond, becomes aware of this growing unrest. She fears a loss of control, recognizing that if Godfrey's personal warriors begin to question the Golden Order, others might follow. The entire foundation of her eternal kingdom rests on unwavering faith and absolute loyalty. Doubt is a poison that can spread and corrupt even the most carefully constructed system. She realizes that she must act decisively to either reaffirm Godfrey's commitment or expose the depth of his wavering allegiance. Half measures will no longer suffice. She needs to know with absolute certainty whether the man she made Elden Lord truly stands with her, or whether his heart remains forever in the savage past. She decides to test Godfrey's resolve one final time to create a crucible that will burn away all pretense and reveal his true nature. Drawing upon her divine authority and her deep understanding of both human nature and the mystical forces that govern the lands between, she orchestrates a trial designed specifically to target Godfrey's deepest vulnerabilities. The exact nature of this trial remains shrouded in the mysteries of that ancient age, but its purpose is clear. It forces Godfrey to confront his deepest fears and desires, to choose definitively between his identity as Hoarah Loux, the warrior who lived for battle and freedom, and his role as Godfrey, first Elden Lord, champion of the Golden Order and enforcer of Marika's eternal peace. The trial strips away the comfortable compromises and half-truths he has been telling himself, demanding an honest reckoning with who he truly is and what he truly values. When the moment of truth arrives, Godfrey fails the trial in the most revealing way possible, not through cowardice or weakness, but by demonstrating his lingering attachment to his warrior identity and his fundamental doubts about Marika's rule. Perhaps he chooses combat when diplomacy was required, or shows mercy to those the Golden Order deemed irredeemable. Perhaps he speaks truths that should have remained unspoken, or refuses an order that contradicted his warrior's code of honor. Whatever the specific failure, it reveals what Marika feared most. Godfrey's transformation was never complete. Beneath the title and the crown, Hoarah Loux still lives, still yearns for the freedom of the wilds and the honest simplicity of the warrior's path. This revelation changes everything, setting in motion events that will reshape the lands between and echo through the ages to come. As we move deeper into the age of the Erd Tree, during the era when the Golden Order was still being forged in fire and conquest, we witness one of the most significant transformations in the history of the lands between. The warrior chieftain Hoarah Loux, whose name had become synonymous with bloodshed and dominance across the Badlands, was chosen by Queen Marika, the Eternal herself, to stand at her side. This was no ordinary political arrangement. Marika, the vessel of the Elden Ring and the god who ruled over all existence in the lands between, saw in this savage warrior something that transcended mere martial skill. She saw the strength necessary to establish her vision of order through absolute conquest. The selection of Hoarah Loux represented a calculated decision on Marika's part. The Badlands chieftain had proven himself not just as a fighter, but as a leader capable of uniting disparate tribes through sheer force of will and combat prowess. His reputation preceded him. Stories told of battlefields littered with the broken bodies of those who had challenged his authority, of entire armies scattered before his rage, of a warrior who fought not with technique alone, but with a primal ferocity that seemed to channel something older than civilization itself. This was exactly what Marika needed. The lands between remained fractured, filled with rival factions, ancient powers, and forces that refused to bend the knee to the Erdtree. To unify these lands under the Golden Order would require more than divine proclamation. It would require a conqueror. When Marika took Hoarah Loux as her consort, she did not simply accept him as he was. The transformation that followed was both symbolic and fundamental. She renamed him Godfrey, stripping away the identity of the Badlands chieftain and replacing it with a name befitting divine royalty. This was not merely a change of title. In the cosmology of the lands between, names carry power and meaning. To be renamed by a god was to be remade. Godfrey was no longer just a warrior from the savage lands beyond civilization's reach. He became something new, something that bridged the gap between the raw, untamed power of the primordial world and the refined, ordered vision that Marika sought to impose upon reality itself. With this transformation complete, Godfrey ascended to become the first Elden Lord. This title had never existed before. There had been no precedent, no template for what it meant to rule alongside a god as her equal in temporal matters, while she maintained dominion over the spiritual. Godfrey's role was to be Marika's strength made manifest, her will enforced through conquest and battle. Where Marika represented the divine authority of the Erd Tree and the metaphysical structure of the Golden Order, Godfrey embodied its physical power, the iron fist that would crush all opposition and bring every corner of the lands between under their unified rule. Marika bestowed upon her new consort additional honors that recognized his unique position. She granted him the title of Chieftain of the Battlefield, an acknowledgement that while he had been elevated to divine lordship, his essential nature as a warrior remained not just intact, but celebrated. This was crucial to understanding Godfrey's role in the emerging order. Unlike other aspects of Marika's reign that sought to suppress or eliminate the chaotic elements of the world, Godfrey's warrior spirit was to be harnessed and directed. He would be the instrument through which the Golden Order expanded its dominion, the champion who would lead armies and personally face the greatest threats to Marika's vision. Yet there was a problem inherent in this arrangement. The very qualities that made Hoarah Loux valuable, his savage strength and his overwhelming bloodlust, posed a danger even to the order he was meant to protect. The chieftain's battle rage was legendary, a berserker fury that knew no distinction between enemy and ally once fully unleashed. In the Badlands, this had been an asset. In the refined court of a divine ruler, it threatened catastrophe. Godfrey himself understood this tension. The warrior who had fought his way to supremacy through pure violence now stood at the center of a civilization that required restraint, diplomacy, and measured application of force. The solution came in the form of Serosh, the Beast Regent. This entity, a spectral lion of immense power and ancient origin, was adopted by Godfrey to serve a very specific purpose. Serosh was not a pet or a companion in the traditional sense. The Beast Regent was bound directly to Godfrey, manifesting as a massive ethereal lion that clung to the Elden Lord's back, its claws dug into his shoulders, its presence a constant weight upon him. This was no mere symbolism. Serosh actively suppressed Godfrey's bloodlust, acting as a living restraint upon the warrior's most dangerous instincts. When Godfrey felt the old rage rising, when the urge to simply destroy everything before him threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking, Serosh's presence pulled him back from that edge. The image of the spectral lion clinging to Godfrey's back became one of the most recognizable symbols of his reign. It represented the duality at the heart of his identity as Elden Lord. Here was a warrior of unmatched ferocity who had voluntarily accepted restraint, who carried the weight of civilization's demands upon his shoulders in the most literal way imaginable. Serosh transformed Godfrey from a savage chieftain into something that could function as a regal authority, a ruler who could sit in judgment and lead with wisdom rather than simply crushing all opposition through brute force. Yet the Beast Regent's presence also served as a reminder that beneath the veneer of lordship, the primal warrior remained, held in check but never truly eliminated. Together, Godfrey and Marika set about establishing the Golden Order as the supreme authority across the lands between. This was not a passive process of cultural diffusion or peaceful conversion. The Golden Order was imposed through systematic conquest, with Godfrey leading the military campaigns that brought region after region under the Erd Tree's grace. The grace itself, that golden light that marked those blessed by the Erd Tree and granted them strength and guidance, became both a gift and a mark of submission. To accept the grace was to accept Marika's rule. To refuse it was to invite Godfrey's wrath. The most significant of these early campaigns was the war against the fire giants. These massive beings, dwelling in the frozen mountaintops of the giants far to the north, represented one of the greatest threats to the Golden Order's supremacy. The fire giants were not merely another tribe or kingdom to be conquered. They were the keepers of the flame of ruin, a primordial fire that predated the Erd tree itself and possessed the power to burn the great tree to ash. This flame was bound to the Fel god, an outer god of fire and destruction whose power stood in direct opposition to everything Marika had built. As long as the fire giants maintained their vigil over this flame, as long as they possessed the means to unleash it, the Golden Order could never be truly secure. Godfrey personally led the war against these giants, wielding his massive axe in battles that shook the mountains themselves. The campaign was brutal and protracted. The fire giants were enormous, each one a warrior of tremendous strength, and they fought with the desperation of a people facing extinction. They understood that this was not a war of conquest in the traditional sense, where defeat might mean subjugation but survival. Marika and Godfrey sought to eliminate the threat of the flame of ruin permanently, and that meant the fire giants themselves had to be destroyed. The siege of the mountaintops of the giants became the defining moment of this war. Godfrey's forces, including the legendary Crucible Knights who fought at his side, assaulted the giants' strongholds in the frozen peaks. The Crucible Knights were warriors who embodied the primordial energies of the Crucible, that ancient state of chaotic life energy that had existed before the Erd tree imposed its order upon the world. These knights bore physical manifestations of this primordial power, sporting tails, wings, and other features that the refined Golden Order would later come to view with suspicion. But in this era, during Godfrey's reign, the Crucible and its energies were still honored as part of the Erd tree's strength. The Crucible Knights fought with a ferocity that matched their lords, channeling ancient powers to battle the giants. The climax of the war came when Godfrey faced the vessel of the Fel god itself. This was no ordinary fire giant, but one who had been chosen to embody the outer god's power most directly, a living conduit for the destructive force of primordial flame. The battle between Godfrey and this vessel was cataclysmic, a clash between the Elden Lord's savage strength and the burning wrath of an ancient god. In the end, Godfrey's axe fell, and the Fel god's vessel was slain. The fire giants were broken, their civilization shattered, their power to threaten the Erd tree seemingly ended. Yet Marika was not satisfied with simple victory. She understood that the flame of ruin could not be destroyed, only contained. In an act of calculated cruelty, she cursed the last surviving fire giant to tend the flame eternally, binding him to the forge where it burned and ensuring that he would guard it in perpetual isolation. This curse served multiple purposes. It guaranteed that the flame would be maintained but never used, kept alive but impotent. It also stood as a warning to all who might consider opposing the Golden Order. Marika's mercy extended only as far as her strategic interests required. Yet even as Godfrey's reign solidified the Golden Order's dominance, the very foundations of that order began to shift in ways that would ultimately doom his place within it. The Crucible Knights, those warriors who had fought alongside Godfrey from the very beginning, and who bore the ancient power of the primordial crucible in their very beings, found themselves increasingly out of step with the evolving ideology of Marika's realm. The Golden Order, as it matured under the guidance of Marika and her consort, began to emphasize purity, refinement, and a strict hierarchy that venerated the Erd tree's golden light above all else. The Crucible, that chaotic wellspring of life from which all things had once emerged, came to be seen not as sacred, but as primitive, a reminder of a wilder, less ordered time that the Golden Order sought to transcend. The aspects of the Crucible that manifested in living beings, those strange amalgamations of horn and wing and scale, were increasingly branded as impure, as deviations from the perfect golden ideal. The Crucible Knights, who had once been honored as elite warriors bearing the blessing of creation itself, were gradually marginalized. Their powers, once celebrated, were now viewed with suspicion and distaste. The order that Godfrey had helped establish turned its back on these loyal servants, and in time, the Crucible Knights were exiled from the centers of power. Some retreated to the fringes of the lands between, guarding ancient sites and forgotten ruins. Others became wandering warriors, their red-plumed helms and ornate armor relics of a bygone era. The exile of the Crucible Knights marked a turning point, a moment when the Golden Order chose dogma over the raw, vital forces that had given it birth, and it foreshadowed the rigid intolerance that would come to define Marika's reign. During these years of consolidation and ideological refinement, Godfrey and Marika brought forth children, demigods born of the union between mortal-turned-god and the divine vessel of the Elden Ring. These offspring would shape the fate of the lands between for ages to come. The first and most celebrated of these children was Godwyn, known to history as Godwyn the Golden. Radiant, noble, and possessed of a grace that seemed to embody everything the Golden Order aspired to, Godwyn became the shining exemplar of his age. He was a warrior of tremendous skill, a diplomat of keen insight, and a leader who inspired devotion in all who served him. Godwyn befriended dragons, forging an alliance that brought the ancient dragon cult into communion with the Golden Order, and he stood as the living symbol of the Erd Tree's promise, a future where strength and virtue were one and the same. The people of Leyndell adored him, and even among the demigods who would later vie for power, Godwyn was remembered with a reverence that bordered on worship. But not all of Godfrey's children were blessed with such fortune. Marika also bore twin sons, Morgott and Mog, and these two were marked from birth by a curse that the Golden Order could not abide. They were omens, beings afflicted with the very same chaotic growths and bestial features that the Order had come to despise. Horns sprouted from their flesh, twisted and gnarled, and their bodies bore the unmistakable signs of the Crucible's influence, that primordial power now deemed anathema. In any other family, such children might have been cast out or killed, but these were the sons of the Elden Lord and the goddess herself. Marika could not bring herself to destroy them outright, yet neither could she allow them to be seen. To acknowledge omen, children born of the divine bloodline, would be to admit that the Golden Order's ideals of purity were hollow, that even the gods themselves were subject to the chaotic forces they claimed to have transcended. And so, Morgott and Mog were hidden away, their existence a closely guarded secret known only to a select few within the royal court. They were imprisoned deep beneath Leyndell, in the labyrinthine subterranean shunning grounds, a network of sewers and catacombs where the capital's unwanted were discarded and forgotten. Here, in the darkness and filth, the twin omens grew to adulthood, surrounded by other cursed beings, by the mad and the monstrous, by everything the Golden Order refused to acknowledge in the light of day. Morgott, despite his imprisonment and the revulsion his very existence inspired, came to love the Golden Order with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. He internalized the teachings he gleaned from fragments of scripture and the distant echoes of the world above, and he came to see his own curse is a test, a burden he must bear in service to the Erd Tree. Mog, by contrast, turned his bitterness and rage outward, seeking power in forbidden places, drawn to the blood and fire that the Order condemned. The tragedy of the Omen twins was a microcosm of the Golden Order's fundamental hypocrisy. It preached perfection and purity, while its very architects were touched by the same primordial chaos it sought to erase. Godfrey, the warrior who had conquered in Marika's name, was father to both the Golden Prince and the cursed outcasts, and this duality would haunt the lands between long after his reign had ended. As Godfrey's rule continued, subtle changes began to manifest among his most loyal followers. The Tarnished warriors, those who had fought beside him since the days when he was still Hoarah Loux, began to notice that the grace of the Erd tree, that golden light that had guided them and marked them as chosen, was fading. At first it was imperceptible, a dimming so gradual that many attributed it to their own failings or the weariness of long campaigns, but in time it became undeniable. The grace that had once shone in their eyes, that had pointed them toward destiny and purpose, was being withdrawn. These warriors, who had bled and died to build Marika's kingdom, found themselves adrift, no longer touched by the Erd tree's blessing. This was no accident, no natural waning of divine favor. It was Marika's doing, a deliberate act woven into plans so vast and inscrutable that even those closest to her could not fathom their scope. Marika had begun to turn against the very order she had established, to question the greater will that had elevated her to godhood and bound her to the Elden Ring. Her reasons were her own, locked behind a divine mind that had witnessed eons and suffered losses no mortal could comprehend, but the stripping of grace from the Tarnished was a clear signal that her designs had shifted. She was preparing for something, an upheaval that would require pieces to be moved off the board, only to return when the time was right, and then came the final, crushing blow. Marika herself, the goddess Godfrey had served and loved, the mother of his children and the architect of his glory, stripped him of grace. The Elden Lord, mightiest of warriors, conqueror of giants and dragons, was cast down not by any enemy's blade, but by the will of his own queen. The grace that had marked him as chosen, that had elevated him above all other warriors, was torn away, and with it went his place in the lands between. Marika declared that Godfrey and his Tarnished were to be exiled, driven from the realm they had fought to build, sent beyond the fog that shrouded the edges of the world. The exile was not merely a banishment, but a transformation. Before Godfrey departed, he was divested of Serosh, the great lion that had rested upon his shoulders and tempered his bloodlust for so many years. The regent beast, that living symbol of restraint and nobility, was removed, and with it went the persona of the Elden Lord. What remained was Hoarah Loux, the warrior chieftain, the savage conqueror who had once painted the battlefield red with the blood of his enemies. The regal bearing, the measured strength, the controlled ferocity that had defined Godfrey's rule, all of it was stripped away, revealing the raw, primal fighter beneath. It was both a humiliation and a liberation, a return to his truest self, even as he was cast out from everything he had built. Hoarah Loux accepted his fate with a warrior's grim resolve. He gathered the Tarnished who had lost their grace, those loyal soldiers who now shared his exile, and he led them out of the lands between. As they crossed into the unknown lands beyond the fog, Hoarah Loux made a vow, not in the courtly language of Leyndell, but in the rough, unvarnished words of a battlefield commander. He swore that they would return, that they would grow strong in the harsh lands of their exile, that they would endure whatever trials awaited them, and that one day they would wage war once more. It was a promise of vengeance, of redemption, of a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of the world that had cast them out. Marika's betrayal of Godfrey, as cruel and inexplicable as it seemed, was in truth a piece of a far larger scheme. She was preparing to challenge the greater will itself, to shatter the Elden Ring and break the chains that bound her to the cosmic order that had shaped reality. By exiling the Tarnished, by sending them into the outer darkness to suffer and struggle and die and be reborn, she was forging them into weapons for a war that had not yet begun. They would return, she knew, tempered by hardship, driven by loss, hungry for the grace that had been taken from them. And when they did, they would be the instruments of change, the ones who would contest the throne and reshape the world according to new laws, or perhaps no laws at all. The Tarnished were scattered to distant lands, places beyond the reach of the Erdtree's light, where they endured poverty, warfare, and death. They were reviled as outcasts, as the graceless, as those abandoned by the gods. And yet they persisted, because that was what Tarnished did. They survived. They fought. They remembered. So in Leyndell, in the great throne room, where Godfrey had once held court, his axe remained, a relic of his reign. It would lie there for untold ages, waiting for the day when one of his distant descendants, a Tarnished called back to the lands between by grace renewed, would take it up and continue the legacy of the first Elden Lord. In the wake of Godfrey's unexpected banishment, a power vacuum threatened to destabilize the very foundations of the Golden Order he had so tirelessly championed. It was then, amidst the growing unrest and uncertainty, that Morgott, the veiled monarch, stepped forward from the shadows. Despite the profound stigma of his Omen heritage, a birthright that should have condemned him to the sewers beneath the capital, Morgott's unwavering loyalty to the Erdtree and his mother, Queen Marika, compelled him to act. He would rise to defend Leyndell, the royal capital, against any who dared challenge its sovereignty, becoming the unyielding bulwark against the encroaching chaos. His existence, a painful secret for so long, was now revealed out of sheer necessity, a testament to the dire straits the lands between found themselves in. Morgott, though reviled by many for his Omen lineage, possessed an innate, almost fanatical devotion to the Golden Order, a devotion that manifested in his relentless patrolling of the capital's outer walls and his vigilant protection of the Erdtree itself. He would brook no dissent, no encroachment, becoming a tragically isolated figure, a king who ruled from the shadows, forever yearning for the acceptance that his birth had denied him. While Morgott embraced his duty, his twin brother Mog took a decidedly different path. Rather than seeking to integrate into the established order, Mog fully embraced his cursed blood and the inherent power it offered. He delved into the forbidden rites of the Formless Mother, an outer god associated with primordial blood and the grotesque. Mog, driven by a twisted vision of a new dynasty, founded the Mogwin dynasty in the subterranean depths, far from the prying eyes of the Golden Order. He sought to elevate his half-brother, Miquella, to godhood, believing Miquella, in his eternal slumber within the Haligtree, to be the perfect vessel for his grotesque ambitions. Mog's actions represented a profound rejection of the Erdtree's dominance and a dangerous embrace of ancient forgotten powers, a stark contrast to Morgott's stoic defense of the established order. His worship of the Formless Mother, a deity of immense and terrifying power, underscored his desire to completely dismantle the existing hierarchy and establish a new, blood-soaked reign, with himself at its head and Miquella as his puppet god. This schism between the Omen twins, one defending the old, the other seeking to birth the new through horrific means, further fractured the already fragile peace of the lands between. The fragile peace, already strained by the absence of Godfrey and the divergent paths of his Omen children, was irrevocably shattered by a single, cataclysmic event, the assassination of Godwyn the Golden. This heinous act, known as the Night of the Black Knives, saw the demigod Godwyn, Marika's firstborn, murdered by assassins wielding blades imbued with the rune of death. The exact circumstances surrounding this event remain shrouded in mystery, but its consequences were immediate and devastating. Godwyn's soul, but not his body, was slain, leading to a corruption that would eventually manifest as the Prince of Death. This unprecedented act of deicide sent shockwaves through the lands between, igniting a powder keg of resentment and ambition. The assassination of a demigod, a child of Queen Marika herself, was an affront of unimaginable proportions, a direct challenge to the authority of the Golden Order and the very fabric of existence. It was a wound that would fester and bleed, ultimately leading to the complete breakdown of order. The grief and fury over Godwyn's death, coupled with the long simmering tensions among the demigods, culminated in Queen Marika's desperate and ultimately self-destructive act. She shattered the Elden Ring. This monumental event, the shattering, plunged the lands between into an era of unprecedented chaos and war. The shards of the Elden Ring, known as Great Runes, were claimed by Marika's demigod children, each imbued with immense power and each vying for dominance. What followed was a brutal and protracted conflict, a war of attrition where brother fought sister and ancient alliances crumbled. The lands between, once a beacon of order under the Golden Order, became a battleground, its beautiful landscapes scarred by endless conflict. The demigods, driven by ambition and the corrupting influence of the Great Runes, unleashed devastating powers upon each other, tearing apart the very fabric of their world. This period of intense warfare and destruction would redefine the political landscape of the lands between, leaving an indelible mark on its history and its people. The shattering was not merely a war, it was an apocalyptic event that reshaped geography, decimated populations, and fundamentally altered the course of history for all who remained. During this tumultuous period, Godfrey's exile continued, stretching across countless centuries. The Tarnished, his loyal warriors and descendants, faded into legend, their connection to grace severed, their purpose seemingly lost. They wandered the fringes of the lands between, forgotten by many, their legacy a whispered tale. The memory of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, became a distant echo, his name occasionally invoked in ancient texts, but his return deemed impossible. The lands between had moved on, or so it seemed, without its first champion. The Tarnished, stripped of their purpose and connection to the Erd Tree, were scattered to the winds, their once proud lineage reduced to a mere historical footnote. Their fading grace was a symbol of their diminished status, a constant reminder of their banishment, and the seemingly insurmountable chasm between them and their former glory. This long period of exile and obscurity further solidified the perception that their time had passed, that their destiny lay in the annals of history rather than in the future of the lands between. Yet destiny in the lands between often takes unexpected turns. After untold centuries of silence, the guidance of grace, the golden light that guides those chosen by the Erd Tree, began to return to the Tarnished. This miraculous resurgence, a faint but undeniable calling, beckoned them back to the lands between, to a realm ravaged by war and shrouded in despair. The reasons for Grace's return were unclear, but its message was undeniable. The time for the Tarnished to reclaim their birthright had come. This reawakening of grace was a pivotal moment, signaling a shift in the cosmic balance and a potential new chapter for the lands between. It was a call to arms for those who had been cast out, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. The Tarnished, once forgotten, were now being summoned back to fulfill a prophecy, to mend the shattered Elden Ring, and to determine the future of their world. Among those who answered the call was Hoarah Loux, the warrior king who had once been Godfrey. Stripped of his title and his beast regent Serosh, Hoarah Loux returned as a Tarnished, his memories of his past life as Elden Lord perhaps fragmented, but his warrior spirit undimmed. He sought to reclaim his lost title, to once again sit upon the Elden throne and restore order to the shattered lands. His return was a testament to his indomitable will and his enduring connection to the lands between, even after centuries of exile. He was no longer the regal Elden Lord, but a primal warrior, his strength honed by hardship and his resolve hardened by time. His quest was not merely for power, but for a restoration of the order he had once embodied, a return to the glory of the Golden Order that had been so brutally dismantled. As Hoarah Loux, He battled his way through the war-torn lands between, confronting the twisted legacies of his descendants and the fractured remnants of his former allies. He witnessed the devastation wrought by the shattering, the grotesque mutations of his children, and the lingering despair that permeated the land. Each encounter was a grim reminder of the price of his banishment and the profound changes that had occurred in his absence. He fought not just for himself, but for the memory of the Golden Order, for the hope of a future where order could once again prevail. His journey was a brutal odyssey, a path paved with conflict and sorrow, as he grappled with the consequences of his past and the grim realities of the present. He faced demigods whose very existence was a perversion of the order he had once championed, and he confronted the bitter truth that the world he knew was irrevocably changed. Ultimately, Hoarah Loux, the Tarnished warrior, would face another Tarnished, the player, in the hallowed grounds of the Erdtree's Colosseum. In this climactic confrontation, he shed the last vestiges of his regal past, embracing his primal warrior self. He fought not as Godfrey, the Elden Lord, but as Hoarah Loux, the chieftain, a pure embodiment of strength and ferocity. This final battle was a test of strength, a clash of wills between two Tarnished vying for the same destiny. It was a confrontation that transcended mere power, becoming a symbolic struggle for the future of the lands between, a duel to determine who was truly worthy of wielding the power of the Elden Ring. Upon his defeat, a moment of profound clarity and acceptance washed over Hoarah Loux. He acknowledged the player's strength, recognizing in them the same unwavering resolve and fighting spirit that had once defined him. In a final, poignant act, he entrusted the player with the future of the Golden Order, passing the torch to a new champion. His journey, though ending in defeats, was a testament to his enduring legacy and his ultimate devotion to the lands between. He had returned, not to reclaim his throne through brute force, but to ensure that a worthy successor would rise, a successor capable of mending the shattered world and ushering in a new age. His defeat was not a failure, but a final act of guidance, a passing of the mantle to the one who had proven themselves truly capable of bearing the immense burden of the Elden Lord. And so, with the Golden Order firmly established and the Erdtree's light shining across the lands between, we arrive at a pivotal yet deeply enigmatic turning point in the age of the Erdtree. The banishment of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and the creation of the first Tarnished. This era, dating to the late period of the Erdtree's initial flourish, marks the precise moment of their exile, a calculated move by Queen Marika that would reverberate through millennia. It was Queen Marika herself, in a move of profound, almost unfathomable foresight, who stripped Godfrey and his devoted warriors of their grace. This was no impulsive act, but a meticulously planned, almost ritualistic divestment, designed to achieve ends known only to Marika at the time. The very essence of grace, that golden light which emanated from the Erdtree and blessed its chosen champions, was systematically withdrawn from Godfrey and his host. This act of stripping grace, a spiritual amputation, marked them indelibly as the first of the Tarnished. The term itself, tarnished, speaks volumes. It implies something once bright and pure, now dulled, stained, or diminished, yet still possessing its fundamental form. They were not destroyed, but changed, their connection to the Golden Order severed at its most fundamental level. This wasn't merely a political decree, but a metaphysical alteration, an act of divine intervention that redefined their very being within the cosmic order of the lands between. The golden glow in their eyes, the outward manifestation of the Erdtree's blessing, flickered and died, replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. This public stripping of grace served as a stark, undeniable symbol of their new status, a visible mark of their separation from the divine favor that had once elevated them. The decree of their banishment, the formal pronouncement of this exile, was not a whispered secret, but a grand spectacle, publicly proclaimed at the very base of the Erd Tree itself, within the hallowed grounds of Leyndell, the royal capital. Imagine the scene: the colossal, golden tree radiating its sacred light, forming the backdrop to this momentous yet somber event. Witnessing this unprecedented pronouncement were the highest echelons of the Golden Order's clergy, the devout priests and scholars who interpreted Marika's will and maintained the intricate theological framework of their faith. Their presence lent an air of absolute authority and divine sanction to the proceedings. The air would have been thick with the scent of incense, the murmur of prayers, and the hushed awe of the assembled faithful. For them, this was a divine pronouncement, an unchallengeable edict from their living goddess. The revocation of Godfrey's title as Elden Lord was not merely a ceremonial removal of a crown, but a formal divine edict from Marika, meticulously severing his ties to the Erd Tree, to the very source of his power and authority. He was no longer the consort of a god, no longer the champion imbued with the Elden Ring's power. He was, in the eyes of the Golden Order, unmade. This public humiliation, this visible stripping of power, was crucial for Marika's overarching plan, whatever its true nature. It solidified the narrative that Godfrey, once the paragon of the Golden Order, was now an outsider, a figure no longer worthy of the divine favor he once commanded. Crucially, during this grace-stripping ritual, Serosh, the Beast Regent, was forcibly unbound from Godfrey's back. Serosh, the regal lion spirit, was not merely a companion, but a living embodiment of Godfrey's restraint, a spiritual tether that kept the primal fury of Hoarah Loux in check. His presence, as we discussed previously, was essential for Godfrey to maintain the composure and dignity required of an Elden Lord. The act of unbinding Serosh, therefore, was not a mere detail. It was a deliberate and profound severance of the very thing that had allowed Godfrey to be Godfrey, the noble, composed warrior. Without Serosh, the raw, untamed essence of Hoarah Loux, the chieftain of the Badland warriors, began to reassert itself. This was a deliberate regression, a shedding of the lordly persona that Marika herself had helped to cultivate. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, the paragon of the Golden Order, was systematically dismantled piece by piece until only his primal self remained. He reverted to Hoarah Loux, a name that resonated with the harsh, brutal lands from which he originated. This transformation was not merely a change of name, but a fundamental shift in identity, a rejection of the gilded cage of lordship for the untamed wildness of his true nature. The ceremonial aspect of this unbinding would have been deeply symbolic, a visual representation of the stripping away of all that made Godfrey lordly. The tarnished host, now marked by their lack of grace, comprised not just Hoarah Loux himself, but a vast retinue of his most loyal commanders and formidable warriors, including the indomitable Crucible Knights. These knights, once the elite vanguard of Godfrey's army, clad in their distinctive armor, adorned with ancient, primal aspects, now found themselves stripped of their golden blessing, yet still possessed of their formidable martial prowess. They, too, were part of Marika's grand design. This entire host, no longer welcome in the lands between, was exiled beyond the fog, a mystical barrier that encircled the continent, separating it from the wider world. The fog was not merely a geographical boundary, it was a symbolic threshold, a demarcation between the blessed lands and the unknown, untamed territories beyond. To be cast beyond the fog was to be cast out from the very fabric of Marika's dominion, to be forgotten by the Erd Tree, and to be left to the harsh realities of a world unblessed by grace. Their journey of exile commenced through the Forbidden Lands crossing, a treacherous path that wound its way out of the lands between. This was no casual departure. Marika's wards, powerful enchantments, and divine barriers were placed at these crossings, specifically designed to prevent their return. These wards were not mere physical obstacles, but magical seals, imbued with the power of the Erd Tree itself, ensuring that once the Tarnished passed through, their path back was irrevocably closed. It was a one-way journey, a point of no return, reinforcing the finality of their banishment. The very landscape seemed to conspire against their re-entry, a testament to Marika's absolute control and the depth of her resolve. Hoarah Loux, now fully re-embracing his identity as the chieftain, led his people across the vast, tumultuous sea, away from the golden glow of the Erd Tree and towards the distant, unforgiving Badlands. This region, known for its brutal, constant warfare and its harsh, unforgiving environment, was a stark contrast to the verdant, blessed lands between. It was a place where strength was measured in blood and survival was a daily struggle. Here, in the crucible of endless conflict, Hoarah Loux's warriors, stripped of their grace and their connection to the Erd Tree, began to adapt to their new reality. They embraced a brutal, pragmatic practice, the grafting of limbs. This horrific, yet effective method of strengthening themselves for battle involved attaching the limbs of fallen foes, or even their own, to their bodies, a testament to their desperation and their unyielding will to survive and conquer. This practice, initially born of necessity, became a hallmark of their martial culture in the Badlands, a grim symbol of their resilience and their willingness to sacrifice anything for power. It was a stark departure from the refined combat of the Golden Order, a return to a more primal, visceral form of warfare. The exiled Tarnished, under Hoarah Loux's ruthless leadership, waged endless wars in these distant lands, their lives a ceaseless cycle of conflict and struggle. Yet this relentless warfare was not without purpose, for it aligned perfectly with Marika's hidden directive, to grow strong in the face of death. This seemingly contradictory command, delivered to them before their banishment, was the true motive behind their exile. Marika did not wish for them to wither and die, but to be forged anew in the fires of adversity. She understood that true strength, a strength untainted by grace or divine blessing, could only be cultivated through hardship, through facing death repeatedly and emerging victorious. The Badlands, with its constant skirmishes and brutal environment, was the perfect training ground for this purpose. Each battle, each scar, each grafted limb was a step towards fulfilling Marika's enigmatic prophecy, a silent testament to her long-term vision. They were not merely exiles, but instruments in a grand cosmic plan, unknowingly honing themselves for a future role. During their long years in the Badlands, Hoarah Loux, in his capacity as chieftain, fathered multiple descendants. These children, born in the harsh realities of exile, inherited the lineage of the first Elden Lord, yet were raised in a world devoid of the Erd Tree's grace. These descendants, growing up in a land of constant warfare and primal struggle, would themselves become potential future Tarnished, carrying within them the dormant seed of their ancestors' destiny. The player character, for instance, is one such descendant, a scion of this exiled lineage, destined to one day return to the lands between and fulfill the prophecy set in motion by Queen Marika so many ages ago. The bloodline of Hoarah Loux, though exiled, was not extinguished. It was merely transplanted, allowed to flourish and strengthen in the crucible of the Badlands, patiently awaiting the day of its return. This period of exile, therefore, was not an end, but a long, arduous preparation, a forging of a new kind of warrior, untainted by the comforts of grace, yet imbued with an indomitable will and a primal strength that would one day challenge the very foundations of the Golden Order. Their banishment was not a punishment, but a strategic deployment, a long game played by a god queen whose motives remain shrouded in mystery. The Crucible Knights, those ancient warriors who had served the primordial crucible of life and then pledged their unwavering fealty to Godfrey, remained steadfast in their loyalty even in exile. Stripped of the Erd Tree's grace and cast out alongside their king, these formidable champions did not simply fade into obscurity. Instead, in the harsh, unforgiving lands beyond the lands between, they began to forge new martial traditions, adapting their combat styles to the brutal realities of their new environment. Their iconic armor, adorned with bestial motifs reflecting the primal energies of the Crucible, became a symbol of their enduring strength and defiance. They refined their unique fighting techniques, integrating the raw power of their Crucible aspects, such as the horns of the Crucible or the tail of the Crucible, into more aggressive and less ceremonious forms of combat. This period of exile was not one of decline for the Crucible Knights, but rather a crucible in itself, hardening their resolve and sharpening their skills, preparing them for an uncertain future. They established enclaves in the Badlands, training grounds where the clang of steel and the roar of combat echoed through desolate valleys, ensuring their lineage of peerless warriors would persist. Meanwhile, back in the lands between, Queen Marika the Eternal, the puppet monarch of the Greater Will, was orchestrating a far more intricate and clandestine plan. Knowing that Godfrey and his tarnished warriors would one day be needed to challenge the established order, Marika secretly instructed the Two Fingers, the colossal digit-like emissaries of the Greater Will, to preserve the lineage of the Tarnished. This was a direct subversion of the Greater Will's apparent intent, which had been to permanently banish Godfrey and his ilk. Marika, ever the schemer, understood that the Tarnished, once bereft of grace and hardened by exile, would possess the very qualities necessary to eventually shatter the Golden Order she herself had helped establish. She ensured that the bloodlines of the Tarnished would not be extinguished, that their descendants, though born without the golden blessing of the Erdtree, would nonetheless carry the potential for its return. This foresight, this long game played out over centuries, underscores Marika's complex motivations and her ultimate desire to break free from the Greater Will's dominion. She ensured that whispers of their heritage, of their destined return, would be passed down through generations, a dormant seed waiting for the right moment to sprout. Hoarah Loux's formidable axe, once gleaming with the golden blessing of the Erd Tree, now stood as a stark and potent symbol of the Tarnished's exile. Stripped of its divine radiance, it became a weapon of raw, unadorned power, reflecting the brutal reality of their banishment. No longer a relic of the Golden Order, it was a testament to their enduring strength, a tool for survival in a hostile world. This transformation mirrored Hoarah Loux himself, once a king imbued with grace, now a chieftain of exiles, reliant on his own might and ferocity. The axe, though devoid of its former glory, gained a new kind of reverence among the Tarnished, representing their defiance, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to their leader. It was a constant reminder of what they had lost, but also a promise of what they might reclaim through sheer force of will. Every swing, every impact resonated with the echoes of their banishment, a percussive beat against the silence of their forgotten past. In the harsh crucible of exile, the banished warriors developed a distinct culture, one profoundly centered around the proving of worth through combat. Stripped of the Erd Tree's grace, and with it, the inherent validation of their existence, they found new meaning in the clash of steel and the test of strength. Dueling became a sacred ritual, not merely for settling disputes, but for affirming individual prowess and collective identity. Tournaments, often brutal and without quarter, were held to determine leadership and establish hierarchy. This constant striving for martial excellence, this relentless pursuit of victory, became the very fabric of their society. It was a culture that inadvertently foreshadowed the eventual call of grace, the moment when Marika's long-laid plans would come to fruition and the Tarnished would be summoned back to the lands between. Their exile, far from weakening them, forged them into a race of peerless warriors, honed by hardship and driven by an insatiable desire to prove their worth. This combative spirit, ingrained over generations, would be their greatest asset when they finally returned to a fractured lands between. In the desolate and untamed Badlands, far from the gilded confines of the Erd Tree, Hoarah Loux underwent a profound transformation. He shed the mantle of Godfrey, the Elden Lord, and embraced his primal self, Hoarah Loux, chieftain of the Badlands. In this harsh environment, he rediscovered his pre-Erd Tree fighting style, a brutal, unrestrained form of martial arts that relied on raw strength, animalistic ferocity, and an unyielding will to dominate. He cast aside the refined techniques taught by the Golden Order and embraced the wild, untamed power that had always resided within him. This was not merely a return to his roots, it was an evolution, a synthesis of his natural aggression with the experience gained as a lord. His battles in the Badlands were not fought with honorific duels, but with savage, no-holds-barred brawls against fearsome beasts and rival tribes. He learned to fight with his bare hands, to grapple with monstrous foes, and to channel his unbridled rage into devastating attacks. Serosh, the spirit lion bound to his back, became an integral part of his fighting style, a conduit for his inner beast, a symbol of his untamed power. This rediscovery of his primal self was crucial as it prepared him for the ultimate challenge that awaited him back in the lands between. Though far removed from the lands between, stories of the Tarnished's battles in foreign lands occasionally filtered back through the intrepid journeys of nomadic merchants. These merchants, traversing treacherous routes and braving perilous territories, would carry tales of the exiled warriors' exploits, their victories against monstrous beasts, their clashes with formidable foreign armies, and their unwavering resilience in the face of adversity. These fragmented accounts, often embellished and exaggerated, served as a faint but persistent reminder of the Tarnished's existence. They were whispers of a forgotten past, echoes of a banished people who, despite their exile, continued to carve out a legend in the distant corners of the world. These tales, though few and far between, kept the memory of Godfrey and his warriors alive, albeit in a distorted and mythologized form within the collective consciousness of the lands between. They hinted at a power that still existed beyond the Erd Tree's reach, a force that might one day return. Even in exile, some of the Crucible Knights, deeply rooted in the traditions of the Golden Order, attempted to maintain aspects of its teachings in their new foreign lands. While adapting their martial styles to the brutal realities of the Badlands, they still held onto the philosophical tenets and spiritual practices that had once defined their existence. They sought to impart the virtues of courage, loyalty, and unwavering faith, albeit now directed towards their chieftain, Hoarah Loux, rather than the greater will. They established small, secluded enclaves where they would practice their ancient rituals, recite their prayers, and train their initiates in the ways of the Crucible, blending the old with the new. This adherence to their former beliefs, even in a drastically altered context, speaks to the profound influence the Golden Order had on their lives. It was an attempt to preserve a part of their identity, a connection to the world they had lost, even as they forged a new one. Their efforts, however, were often met with skepticism or outright hostility from the indigenous populations of the Badlands, highlighting the cultural clash inherent in their exile. Throughout his prolonged exile, Hoarah Loux, ever the shrewd and calculating leader, deliberately avoided contact with outer gods. He understood the dangers inherent in such alliances, having witnessed firsthand the greater will's manipulative influence. His primary loyalty remained with Marika and the long-term plan she had subtly set in motion. He He knew that any entanglement with other cosmic entities could derail their ultimate objective, the return to the lands between and the eventual shattering of the Golden Order. He resisted the temptations of power offered by lesser deities or primordial forces, maintaining a singular focus on his eventual destiny. This deliberate isolation from outer god influence ensured that when the time came, the Tarnished would be free agents, unburdened by external loyalties or conflicting agendas. It was a testament to his unwavering commitment to Marika's vision, a silent pact forged across the vastness of their separation. The prolonged absence of the Tarnished from the lands between created a significant power vacuum, a void that would ultimately contribute to the coming shattering. With Godfrey and his formidable warriors gone, the delicate balance of power within the lands between began to shift. The demigods, Marika's offspring, grew increasingly ambitious and independent, their rivalries escalating without the unifying presence of an Elden Lord to keep them in check. The Golden Order, while still ostensibly in power, lost its most potent enforcers, its most dedicated champions. This gradual erosion of authority and the unchecked rise of demigod factions laid the groundwork for the devastating conflict that would eventually tear the lands between asunder. The absence of the Tarnished was not merely a footnote in history, it was a critical factor that destabilized the entire realm, paving the way for the age of conflict and fragmentation. Despite their banishment and the harsh realities of their new lives, Hoarah Loux's warriors preserved fragments of Erd tree worship, subtly merging it with their burgeoning warrior culture. While they no longer received the direct blessing of the Erd tree, they continued to revere its symbolic power, its connection to life and rebirth. They incorporated elements of Erd tree iconography into their armor and weaponry, not as symbols of subservience, but as reminders of their heritage and their ultimate goal, to reclaim what was once theirs. Their prayers, while no longer directed solely to the greater will, often invoked the imagery of the Erd tree, intertwining it with their ancestral warrior spirits and the primal forces of the Badlands. This syncretic approach allowed them to maintain a connection to their past while adapting to their present, ensuring that the legacy of the Erd tree, however fragmented, would endure among the Tarnished. It was a testament to the deep-seated spiritual beliefs that permeated their society, even in exile. Among the exiled Tarnished, skilled smiths, inheritors of the ancient forging traditions of the lands between, developed new weapons and armor styles, blending the intricate designs and robust construction of Golden Order motifs with the practical, often brutal techniques learned in foreign lands. They created a unique aesthetic. Their armor, while still bearing echoes of the Erd tree's grace, was more rugged, more functional, designed for sustained combat in unforgiving environments. Weapons, once ornate and ceremonial, became honed instruments of war, imbued with the raw power of the Badlands. These smiths, working in makeshift forges, in desolate caves, and fortified encampments, became vital to the Tarnished's survival, ensuring their warriors were always equipped with the finest tools of destruction. Their craftsmanship became a blend of necessity and artistry, a testament to their enduring ingenuity and their refusal to be diminished by exile. The very materials they used, often scavenged or traded from foreign lands, contributed to the distinctive appearance of their gear, a stark contrast to the gleaming gold of the lands between. Marika, ever the architect of destiny, maintained her intricate web of foresight. Even across the vast, churning seas, separating the lands between from the Badlands, her divine echoes continued to watch over the Tarnished. These were not direct pronouncements or overt interventions, but rather subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in the cosmic winds, a faint hum in the ether, guiding certain events, nudging probabilities. She had woven mechanisms into the very fabric of their banishment, ensuring that while absent, they were never truly forgotten or beyond her influence. It was a long game, played out over centuries, and every piece, every banished warrior, was a pawn in her grand, mysterious design. Hoarah Loux, embodying the very spirit of the warrior, understood this implicitly. His role was not merely to lead, but to forge. He occasionally, and with brutal efficacy, dueled his own warriors. These were not mere sparring matches, but tests of mettle, trials by combat designed to push them to their limits, to hone their instincts, and to maintain the razor's edge of their combat readiness. This practice was a direct continuation of Marika's original design, a living crucible intended to prevent stagnation and ensure that when the time came, the Tarnished would be a force to be reckoned with, not a forgotten relic of a bygone era. These duels were often held in the desolate, windswept plains of the Badlands, the clanging of steel echoing under alien constellations, a stark reminder of their exile and the harsh reality of their new existence. The warriors who faced Hoarah Loux and survived bore not only the scars of battle, but also the profound respect of their peers, their prowess undeniably proven against the mightiest of their kind. The exiled host, under Hoarah Loux's stern but just leadership, quickly established a new warrior code, one born of necessity and the relentless grind of survival. In the Badlands, a harsh and unforgiving land teeming with its own formidable beasts and warring tribes, only those who survived countless battles were deemed worthy of respect, of leadership, of even continued existence within the core fighting force. This wasn't a formal decree etched in stone, but an unspoken understanding, a brutal meritocracy where strength and resilience were the ultimate currencies. Weakness was not tolerated, for it endangered the entire collective. This constant struggle against their environment and each other forged an unparalleled fighting force, each warrior a veteran of countless skirmishes, each blow delivered with the weight of hard-won experience. Their lives were a testament to the adage, "What does not kill you makes you stronger." As the centuries of exile stretched on, some tarnished, driven by a need for resources, a thirst for further combat, or simply a desire to explore beyond the immediate confines of their encampments, ventured further afield. They turned mercenary in the foreign lands bordering the Badlands, selling their unparalleled combat skills to various warlords and petty kings. These were often brutal, short-lived campaigns, fought for gold, supplies, or simply the thrill of the fight. Their reputation as fearsome, unyielding warriors spread like wildfire, their distinct fighting styles and grim determination making them highly sought after. They became known as the Golden Blades, or the Exiled Hawks, their presence on a battlefield often turning the tide of conflict. This mercenary work, while providing a means of survival, also served another purpose. It kept their skills sharp, their bodies conditioned, and their minds focused on the art of war, a constant practical training regimen that would prove invaluable in the distant future. Despite the allure of returning to the familiar, to the lands between, Hoarah Loux adamantly forbade any attempts to return prematurely. His conviction was absolute. Only Marika's call, a divine summons, would legitimize their homecoming. Any unauthorized attempt, he believed, would be a transgression against the Golden Order itself, a defiance of the very will that had cast them out. He understood the profound significance of their banishment, not as a punishment, but as a purposeful act within a larger, unfolding narrative. To return without divine sanction would be to invalidate their entire exile, to render their suffering meaningless. His authority on this matter was unquestioned, his pronouncements carrying the weight of both his immense power and his unwavering loyalty to Marika. He instilled in his warriors the patience of a predator, the understanding that their time would come, but only when the stars aligned and the divine signal was given. The prolonged battles, the constant exposure to the harsh elements of the Badlands, and perhaps even a subtle, lingering effect of their banishment itself began to take a toll on the Tarnished in a very visible way. Their eyes, once reflecting the golden hue of the Erd tree's grace, began to fade. The vibrant gold receded, replaced by a dull, almost milky pallor, a visual mark of their prolonged separation from the blessings of the Erd tree. This fading of the golden eye, a distinctive characteristic of the Tarnished, became a universal identifier, marking them visually as outcasts, as those who had been touched by the crucible of exile. It was a physical manifestation of their spiritual separation, a constant reminder of what they had lost and what they yearned to regain. This visual distinction further cemented their unique identity, setting them apart from both the inhabitants of the Badlands and the memories of their former lives in the lands between. As centuries turned into millennia, legends grew in the Badlands about these golden exiles who awaited a divine summons. Tales were whispered around campfires, sung in sagas by traveling bards, and etched into the crude rock art of indigenous tribes. They spoke of a fearsome, unyielding people, touched by the gods, who had been cast out, but would one day return to reclaim their birthright. These legends, often exaggerated and embellished, painted a picture of a patient, powerful force biding its time, a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. The golden epithet, despite their fading eyes, persisted, a reference to their divine origins and the lingering hope of their eventual return to grace. These stories, though distorted by time and distance, served to keep the flame of their identity alive, both within their own ranks and in the wider consciousness of the lands they now inhabited. Hoarah Loux, ever the pragmatist, with an eye towards the future, performed a symbolic act that underscored his unwavering belief in their eventual return. He buried his lordly crown, not in a shallow grave, but in a carefully chosen, protected location within the Badlands. This was not an act of abandonment, but of preservation. He understood the profound symbolic power of the crown, a tangible link to his past as Godfrey, first Elden Lord. He kept it preserved, meticulously protected from the elements and the ravages of time, for a potential future return. It was a silent promise, a physical manifestation of his conviction that one day he would reclaim his title and don the crown once more. This act served as a powerful unspoken affirmation to his warriors that their exile was temporary and their ultimate destiny lay back in the lands between. The exiled warriors, united by their shared fate and their relentless struggle, developed a distinct battle cry. It was a guttural, resonant roar, a complex vocalization that referenced both their Erd Tree past and their current exile. It was a cry that spoke of lost grace, of enduring strength, of unwavering loyalty to a distant queen, and of the fierce determination born of countless battles in a foreign land. This battle cry, unique to the Tarnished, became their signature, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies and galvanizing their own ranks. It was a primal sound, a testament to their enduring spirit, a voice that carried the weight of their history and the promise of their future. It was a sound that would eventually echo across the lands between once more. As the cataclysmic war for the shards of the Elden Ring, approached in the distant lands between, Marika's grand design entered its final, crucial phase. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and the time for the Tarnished's return was drawing near. Marika, through her subtle, divine mechanisms, began to prepare to reactivate the Tarnished's grace. This was not a simple flick of a switch, but a complex cosmic recalibration, a reestablishment of the divine connection that had been severed centuries ago. The fading of their eyes, the prolonged exile, the countless battles, all had been part of this intricate plan. Their grace, once lost, was now poised to be rekindled, a beacon in the encroaching darkness, a final, desperate gambit in the face of the lands between's impending ruin. The long night of their exile was about to end, and a new dawn, or perhaps a new twilight, was about to break. As we transition from the era of Godfrey's banishment, a period of profound upheaval begins, marking the return of the Tarnished to the lands between. The timeline now shifts to the post-shattering era, a time of unprecedented chaos and fractured power. It was Queen Marika herself, in an act shrouded in mystery and divine defiance, who shattered the very foundation of the Golden Order, the Elden Ring. This cataclysmic event, a cosmic sundering of fundamental laws and divine essence, plunged the lands between into an age of unparalleled turmoil. The golden light that had once emanated from the Erd Tree, a symbol of Marika's unwavering rule and the Greater Will's dominion, flickered and dimmed, replaced by an oppressive pall of uncertainty and fear. The fragments of the Elden Ring, now known as Great Runes, scattered across the land, each imbued with a portion of the ring's immense power. Marika's children, the demigods, those born of her divine lineage and imbued with extraordinary power, immediately descended into a brutal and protracted conflict known as the Shattering War. These were not mere squabbles over territory, but a desperate struggle for control over the Great Runes, each demigod believing themselves destined to mend the fractured Elden Ring and ascend to the throne of Elden Lord. The once united demigods, bound by blood and divine decree, turned on one another with a ferocity that tore the very fabric of the lands between. Castles crumbled, armies clashed in devastating battles, and the once fertile lands were scarred by the relentless conflict. Each demigod sought to claim the largest share of the shattered ring, their ambitions fueled by a potent cocktail of divine right, personal pride, and the intoxicating power of the Great Runes. This was a war not just of armies, but of ideologies, of differing interpretations of the Golden Order, and of the very nature of divinity itself. The ramifications of their internecine strife were felt across every corner of the lands between, from the highest peaks to the deepest catacombs. Sensing the profound instability and the imminent collapse of its meticulously crafted order, the Greater Will, the enigmatic outer god that had guided Marika and established the Golden Order, intervened. Its solution, a desperate and audacious gamble, was to call back those who had been cast out, those who had lost the guidance of grace, the Tarnished. For generations, these individuals and their descendants had wandered beyond the fog, forgotten by the lands between, their connection to the Erd Tree severed. But now, with the Golden Order on the brink of utter ruin, the Greater Will rekindled the faded embers of grace within them, a faint but undeniable light guiding them back to the fractured realm. This was a desperate plea, a last resort to restore order and re-establish the dominion of the Greater Will. The Tarnished, once deemed unworthy, were now the only hope for a land consumed by civil war and divine discord. Among those who heard this ancient, resonant call was Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, once known as Hoarah Loux, chieftain of the Badlands. Even in his exile, stripped of his grace and banished from the lands between, the echoes of the shattering and the Greater Will's desperate summons reached him. For Godfrey, this was more than just a call to arms. It was a reawakening of his destiny, a chance to reclaim his lost glory and fulfill his sacred duty as the rightful Elden Lord. He had been exiled for a reason, his spirit too wild, too attuned to battle, to truly embrace the placid existence of an Elden Lord. But now, in this time of ultimate chaos, his warrior spirit was precisely what the lands between desperately needed. He prepared to return, his heart burning with a renewed purpose, his gaze fixed on the distant fog-shrouded shores of his former kingdom. Gathering around him were his loyal warriors, the original Tarnished, those who had followed him into exile long ago. These were the fierce, unyielding champions who had fought alongside him in countless battles against the giants and other threats to the nascent Golden Order. They had shared his banishment, their grace fading alongside his, their purpose seemingly lost in the vast, forgotten lands beyond the fog. But with the greater will's summons, the dormant grace within them stirred, a primal urge to reclaim what was lost, to return to the land they had once defended. They rallied to Godfrey's side, their eyes reflecting the same fierce determination as their chieftain. They were a testament to enduring loyalty and an unyielding spirit, a force forged in hardship and united by a shared destiny. Their return was not merely a journey, but a pilgrimage, a defiant march to reclaim their birthright and restore the glory of their former lord. Together, Godfrey and his devoted Tarnished set sail across the treacherous sea of fog, a mystical barrier that had long separated the lands between from the rest of the world. Their journey was arduous, fraught with peril and uncertainty, but their resolve remained unshaken. They finally made landfall at the Chapel of Anticipation, a desolate and crumbling structure perched on the very edge of the lands between. This was their first step back into a land that had once been their home, now transformed into a battlefield. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and the lingering echoes of conflict, a stark contrast to the vibrant, grace-filled land they had left behind. However, their return was not met with open arms. The remaining forces of the Golden Order, now fractured and leaderless, viewed the returning Tarnished with suspicion and hostility. The shattering had not only broken the Elden Ring, but had also shattered the unity of the Golden Order itself. Its various factions, clinging to their own interpretations of Marika's will and the Greater Will's decrees, saw the Tarnished as invaders, a threat to their already precarious hold on power. They had forgotten the sacrifices made by Godfrey and his warriors, remembering only their banishment. The once sacred duty of the Golden Order to protect the lands between had devolved into a desperate struggle for survival and dominance among its own remnants. Despite the immediate hostility, Godfrey's purpose remained clear: to reclaim his title as Elden Lord. He believed it was his inherent destiny, a divine mandate to restore the Elden Ring and bring order back to the ravaged lands between. He was the first Elden Lord, chosen by Marika herself, and in his eyes, no other could truly mend the broken world. His ambition was not born of selfish desire, but of a profound sense of duty and a deep-seated belief in his own capacity to wield the power of the Elden Ring. He understood the immense responsibility that came with the title, and he was prepared to shoulder it once more, even if it meant confronting the very forces that had once served him. As he ventured deeper into the lands between, Godfrey began to learn of the fates of Marika's children, the demigods who had plunged the realm into the shattering war. He heard tales of Godric the Grafted, a grotesque and ambitious descendant who had claimed a great rune and now ruled Stormvale Castle, his body horrifically augmented with the limbs of defeated warriors. He learned of Radon, the mighty Star Scourge, a colossal warrior who had halted the very stars in their tracks, now consumed by the scarlet rot in the desolate wastes of Caelid. There was Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, who had sacrificed himself to a monstrous serpent in Volcano Manor, becoming a grotesque fusion of man and beast. And there were others, each wielding a fragment of the Elden Ring, each locked in a desperate struggle for supremacy, their ambitions clashing in a symphony of destruction. Godfrey understood that to reclaim his title, he would first have to contend with these powerful, fractured remnants of Marika's lineage. Soon after his return, Godfrey encountered the Two Fingers, enigmatic envoys of the Greater Will. These ancient, colossal digits, revered as direct conduits to the outer god, communicated through their interpreters, urging Godfrey to seek out the great runes, the shards of the shattered Elden Ring. They reiterated the Greater Will's desperate plea for order, emphasizing Godfrey's pivotal role in mending the fractured realm. The two fingers, with their cryptic pronouncements and their unwavering faith in the Greater Will's divine plan, served as a constant reminder of the immense cosmic stakes involved in Godfrey's quest. They were the voice of the outer God, guiding him, pushing him towards his ultimate destiny. His journey was not without immediate conflict. As he pressed deeper into the lands between, Godfrey clashed with the remnants of the Golden Order's armies, those who still clung to their fading authority and viewed him as an intruder. He faced formidable opponents, including the imposing tree sentinels, heavily armored knights mounted on gilded steeds, who guarded vital pathways and sacred sites. These were the elite guardians of the Golden Order, unwavering in their duty, even in a world turned upside down. He also encountered the Crucible Knights, ancient warriors whose armor was adorned with bestial motifs, embodying the primordial aspects of the Erd Tree. These powerful foes, once allies, now stood as obstacles, their loyalty to a fractured Golden Order compelling them to resist Godfrey's return. Each encounter was a testament to the profound disarray and internecine conflict that gripped the lands between, a world where former allies had become formidable adversaries. Having been called back to the lands between, Godfrey, now known as Hoarah Loux, chieftain of the Badlands, found himself amidst a land irrevocably scarred by the cataclysmic event known as the Shattering. The once golden glow of the Erd Tree, symbol of the Golden Order's dominion, was now muted, its branches twisted and broken. His initial return was met with a grim revelation. Marika, his former consort and the very vessel of the Elden Ring, was not merely absent, but imprisoned within the Erd Tree itself. Her divine form, though shattered into countless fragments, still pulsed with a faint, agonizing life, a testament to the Greater Will's cruel judgment. This discovery, a profound betrayal of the divine order he once championed, fueled a quiet fury within the first Tarnished. It was during this period of reacquaintance with the broken world that Godfrey began to understand the true nature of his return and the Greater Will's intricate, often brutal, plan. He learned of the Tarnished's designated role: to traverse the blighted lands, gather the scattered great runes, the fragmented essence of the Elden Ring, and ultimately mend the cosmic artifact. This was not a plea, but a divine imperative, a task bestowed upon those who had once been cast out, now recalled to fulfill a purpose they could not refuse. The path, however, was fraught with peril, for the great runes were jealously guarded by Marika's demigod offspring, each driven to madness or corruption by their inheritance. Godfrey, ever the warrior, wasted no time in confronting these fractured remnants of his former family. His first target was Godric the Grafted, the weakest and most grotesque of the demigods, who had taken refuge within the formidable walls of Stormvale Castle. Godric, in his pathetic attempt to emulate the strength of his ancestors, had resorted to grafting the limbs of fallen warriors onto his own body, a grotesque display of ambition and desperation. Godfrey, with the raw power of Hoarah Loux reawakened, cut through Godric's defenses and his grafted monstrosity with brutal efficiency. The battle was a stark reminder of the degeneracy that had plagued the Golden lineage, and with Godric's defeat, Godfrey claimed his first great rune, a tangible piece of the shattered Elden Ring. His journey then led him eastward to the crimson-stained wastes of Caelid. This was a land utterly ravaged by the Scarlet Rot, a virulent plague born from the goddess Millennia's desperate clash with Star-Scourge Radon. The very air in Caelid was thick with decay, the ground a festering expanse of scarlet fungal growth. Here, Godfrey witnessed the horrifying aftermath of Radon's madness. A once proud general reduced to a feral beast, perpetually devouring the corpses of his fallen enemies. The sight was a chilling testament to the destructive power of the outer gods and the fragility of even the mightiest demigods. The confrontation with Star Scourge Radon was inevitable. The colossal general, whose gravity magic once held the very stars in place, now roamed the Wailing Dunes, a tragic figure consumed by the rot. The battle was a cataclysmic clash of titans, a testament to Godfrey's unwavering strength and Radon's indomitable will, even in madness. Godfrey, channeling the full might of Hoarah Loux, battled through Radon's devastating gravity attacks and his relentless charges. It was a brutal, drawn-out affair, a testament to the sheer power of the demigod. Ultimately, Godfrey emerged victorious, not without significant effort, and claimed Radon's Great Rune, another crucial piece in the grand puzzle of the Elden Ring. The defeat of Radon, though necessary, was a somber victory, for it marked the end of a once noble warrior, a victim of forces beyond his control. With 2 great runes in hand, Godfrey continued his arduous journey, ascending to the majestic Altus Plateau. This elevated region, bathed in the perpetual golden light of the Erd Tree, was home to Leyndell, the royal capital, a city that once epitomized the glory of the Golden Order. However, the capital was now a fortress, its gates barred, its streets patrolled by the formidable forces of Morgott, the Omen King. Morgott, once known as Margit the Fell Omen, was an omen, a cursed being born with horns and a tail, an abomination in the eyes of the Golden Order. Yet he was also the self-proclaimed protector of the Erd Tree, a loyal, if tragically flawed, guardian. He was also, to Godfrey's grim realization, his own descendant, a product of Marika's later unions. The clash with Morgott was a deeply personal one. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, faced his own lineage, a descendant who, despite his cursed birth, fiercely defended the very order that had scorned him. Morgott, fueled by a distorted sense of duty and a profound loneliness, fought with a desperate ferocity, wielding spectral weapons conjured from his omen blood. The duel was a testament to the enduring power of the golden lineage, a clash of wills and legacies. Godfrey, though saddened by the necessity, ultimately defeated Morgott, his own blood, and with his fall, the path to the Erd Tree within Leyndell was finally open. As Godfrey approached the base of the colossal Erd Tree, a sense of grim anticipation filled him. He had fought, he had conquered, he had gathered the great runes. The culmination of his long and arduous journey was at hand. However, his hopes were dashed upon reaching the colossal trunk. The Erd Tree, the very heart of the Golden Order, was impenetrable. Its entrance was sealed by an impenetrable barrier of thorns, a fiery, unyielding wall that defied all attempts to breach it. This was not a physical obstacle, but a divine one, a clear signal from the greater will itself. The realization struck Godfrey with the force of a physical blow. The greater will had rejected all claimants, all who sought to become the next Elden Lord. The path was not merely difficult, it was utterly closed. In his despair and frustration, Godfrey learned of a forbidden power, a desperate measure whispered in hushed tones, the flame of frenzy. This ancient, chaotic fire, antithetical to the ordered world of the Erd Tree, was rumored to possess the power to burn anything, even the impenetrable thorns that barred his way. The flame of frenzy, an outer god in its own right, offered a path, but at a terrible cost. It promised to melt away the barriers, to grant access to the Erd Tree, but in doing so, it would consume all, reducing the entire world to a sea of formless, chaotic fire. The allure of such power, the desperate hope it offered, was immense. To finally reach Marika, to mend the Elden Ring, to fulfill his purpose, all seemed within his grasp. Yet Godfrey, despite his warrior's pragmatism, recoiled from the flame's chaotic embrace. He understood the immense destructive potential of such a power, the utter annihilation it represented. To wield the flame of frenzy was not merely to burn the thorns, but to condemn the entire lands between to a fiery oblivion, to erase all traces of the Golden Order, and indeed all life as it was known. He had fought to restore order, not to plunge the world into an even deeper abyss of chaos. He resisted its insidious allure, fearing its power, and resolved to seek another path, a way to enter the Erd Tree without sacrificing the very world he sought to save. It was in this moment of profound uncertainty, of a crossroads between desperate measures and utter despair, that Godfrey encountered Melina. A mysterious figure cloaked in shadow, with eyes that held the wisdom of ages, Melina presented herself as a kindling maiden. She offered Godfrey a solution, a path that circumvented the destructive chaos of the flame of frenzy. Her proposal was audacious, fraught with peril, yet offered a glimmer of hope: to burn the thorns of the Erd Tree with destined death itself. This was not a metaphor, but a literal act, involving the sacrificing of a maiden to ignite the Erd Tree with a flame that was not of frenzy, but of true, unadulterated death. Melina, with a quiet solemnity, offered herself as that sacrifice, her very existence intertwined with this grim purpose. Her offer, a testament to her unwavering conviction, presented Godfrey with a stark choice: embrace the chaos of the flame of frenzy, or accept the sacrifice of a maiden to wield the power of destined death. The weight of this decision, the moral implications of either path, settled heavily upon the shoulders of the first Tarnished. His path, however, was far from clear. The treacherous journey to the mountain tops of the giants lay before him, a region scarred by ancient conflicts and guarded by formidable foes. It was here, amidst the perpetual snows and craggy peaks, that Godfrey confronted the colossal fire giant, a being imbued with the ancient flame that once threatened the Erd Tree itself. This was no mere beast, but a remnant of a bygone era, a living monument to the primordial crucible from which life itself had sprung. The battle was a test of raw strength and unwavering resolve, a clash of wills that echoed through the frozen wastes. Godfrey, the first Tarnished, the warrior king, ultimately prevailed, claiming the Flame of Ruin, a potent and destructive force that had been sealed away for millennia. This act, while necessary for his ultimate goal, carried immense implications. The Flame of Ruin was a double-edged sword, capable of immense destruction and rebirth, a power that even the greater will had sought to contain. With the Flame of Ruin in his possession, Godfrey returned to the foot of the Erd Tree, its golden branches now choked by the impenetrable thorns of the crucible. These thorns, a manifestation of the Erd Tree's own self-preservation, had become an insurmountable barrier, preventing anyone from reaching its heart. It was a cruel irony that the very entity meant to guide and protect the lands between now stood as its greatest obstacle. With a heavy heart, understanding the devastating consequences, Godfrey ignited the thorns with the Flame of Ruin. The ancient wood, once a symbol of life and bounty, now crackled and burned, a horrifying spectacle that cast an ominous glow across the capital. This act, while granting him entry, simultaneously triggered the catastrophic collapse of Leyndell's defenses. The golden walls, once thought impregnable, crumbled under the searing heat and concussive force, revealing the capital to the ravages of the outside world. The unified resistance of the royal capital, already weakened by the shattering, was irrevocably broken. This was a necessary sacrifice, a brutal choice for a brutal age, but one that weighed heavily on the soul of the warrior king. The smoke and ash rising from the burning Erd Tree served as a grim testament to the lengths he was willing to go to fulfill his destiny. Ascending through the ravaged capital, past the fallen defenders and the echoes of a once glorious age, Godfrey finally reached the Elden Throne. This sacred space, the very heart of the Golden Order, now lay in disarray, a testament to the cataclysm that had befallen the lands between. Here, amidst the shattered remnants of what was, he faced the final guardian, Radagon of the Golden Order. Radagon, the second husband of Queen Marika and the father of many demigods, was not merely a champion, but an intrinsic part of Marika herself, a dualistic manifestation of her divine will. Their forms were intertwined, their fates inextricably linked. This was not a battle against an enemy, but a confrontation with the very essence of the Golden Order, and a struggle against the divine will that had shaped the lands between for so long. Radagon, a master of holy magic and a formidable warrior, fought with the conviction of a zealot, defending the shattered remnants of the Elden Ring with every fiber of his being. The clash was epic, a symphony of divine power and raw, untamed strength. Godfrey, fueled by the grace that had returned to him and the weight of his destiny, fought with a ferocity born of both love and duty. He had to overcome this final obstacle, this embodiment of the Golden Order, to reach Marika and the Elden Ring. In the end, Godfrey, the first Tarnished, triumphed. Radagon, the champion of the Golden Order, fell before him. But the victory was bittersweet, for what awaited him was not the triumphant reunion he might have envisioned. Instead, he found Marika's shattered form, her body broken and merging with the Elden Ring's remnants. The divine vessel, once the embodiment of the greater will's power, was now a fractured shell, a testament to the immense forces that had torn it asunder. The Elden Ring itself was not a physical object in the traditional sense, but a concept, a set of rules and principles that governed the very fabric of reality. Its shattered state meant that the very laws of the world were in disarray, leading to the chaos and suffering that plagued the lands between. Marika, the Empyrean Queen, had, in her own way, defied the greater will, shattering the Elden Ring in an act of rebellion and despair. Her broken form was a reflection of the broken world, a symbol of the immense cost of divine intervention and human ambition. At this critical juncture, with the Elden Ring shattered and Marika's form intertwined with its remnants, the greater will's influence began to wane. Its grip on the lands between, once absolute, was now loosening, its power diminished by the very chaos it had inadvertently wrought. The cosmic entity which had guided and manipulated events for millennia found its authority challenged and its dominion threatened. The age of absolute divine rule was drawing to a close, paving the way for a new era, one where the fate of the lands between might finally rest in the hands of its inhabitants. The Tarnished, once exiled and scorned, now stood at the precipice of this new age, their journey culminating in a moment of profound choice and immense consequence. Their struggle, their perseverance, had brought them to this point, to a moment where the very future of their world hung in the balance. Godfrey, standing before the shattered Elden Ring and the broken form of his beloved Marika, faced a monumental decision. The path forward was not clear, and the weight of the lands between's destiny rested squarely on his shoulders. He had several options, each with profound implications for the future. He could attempt to restore the Golden Order, to mend the Elden Ring in a way that reaffirmed the greater will's dominance and reestablished the old hierarchy. This would mean embracing the very system that had exiled him and caused so much suffering, but it would also bring a semblance of stability, albeit under the old regime. Alternatively, he could choose to usher in a new age under his own rule, using the power of the Elden Ring to forge a new order, one perhaps free from the direct influence of the greater will. This would be an act of immense ambition, a declaration of his own sovereignty, but it also carried the risk of tyranny and unchecked power. Or he could defy the greater will entirely, rejecting its authority and seeking to create a world truly free from its cosmic manipulation, a world where the people of the lands between determined their own destiny. This was the most radical option, the most uncertain, but perhaps the most liberating. The choice was his, and it would define the future of the lands between for centuries to come. After a moment of profound contemplation, a silent communion with the shattered remnants of the Elden Ring and the broken spirit of Marika, Godfrey made his choice. He opted to mend the Elden Ring, not to fully restore the Golden Order as it once was, nor to seize absolute power for himself, but to restore a semblance of order to the fractured world. This was a pragmatic decision, born of his warrior's understanding of the necessity of structure and his king's desire for stability. He recognized that complete anarchy would only lead to further suffering. By mending the Elden Ring, he aimed to reestablish the fundamental laws of the world, to bring balance back to the lands between, even if that balance was imperfect and bore the scars of the shattering. In this act, he became the new Elden Lord, not a puppet of the greater will, but a sovereign who had earned his title through blood and sacrifice. His rule would be one of tempered authority, a guiding hand in a world still reeling from cataclysm. With the Elden Ring mended, a profound shift occurred across the lands between. The grace that had been stripped from the Tarnished, the guiding light that had led them on their perilous journey, was granted once more. Their exile, a decree from the greater will, was officially ended. This was a moment of vindication for those who had been cast out, a recognition of their perseverance and their crucial role in the mending of the world. However, the lands between remained deeply scarred by the war, a testament to the immense cost of the shattering. The once pristine landscapes were ravaged, cities lay in ruins, and the echoes of conflict still resonated through the air. The wounds of war, both physical and spiritual, would take generations to heal if they ever truly could. The mending of the Elden Ring was a beginning, not an end, to the long and arduous process of rebuilding. Godfrey, now Elden Lord, ruled from Leyndell, the royal capital, which, despite the devastation it had endured, still stood as a symbol of authority. However, the Erd Tree's light, once a brilliant beacon of the Golden Order, was now dimmed, its golden glow muted by the lingering shadows of the flame of ruin and the trauma of the shattering. The world was forever changed, its innocence lost, its faith shaken. The absolute dominion of the greater will was broken, replaced by a more nuanced and contested reality. The age of unwavering belief had given way to an age of questioning, of uncertainty, and of the enduring struggle for power and influence. The cycle of the Elden Ring, the cosmic dance of creation and destruction, continued, but it was a cycle forever marked by the shattering. The scars of that cataclysmic event ensured that peace, even under the new Elden Lord, would be fragile and constantly contested. The various factions, the surviving demigods, the ancient houses, and the myriad peoples of the lands between would continue their struggles for power and influence, their ambitions fueled by the lingering chaos and the diminished authority of the divine. The mending of the Elden Ring was not a return to a golden age, but the dawn of a new, more complex era, one where the fate of the lands between rested not solely on divine will, but on the choices and actions of its inhabitants. The journey of Godfrey, the first Tarnished, had come full circle, from exile to Elden Lord, but the true journey of the lands between had only just begun. As the age of the Tarnished dawned, marking the tumultuous period of reclamation, the lands between, shattered and leaderless, began to draw back those it had long cast out. It was during this fractured era, following the cataclysmic events of the shattering and the subsequent call of grace to the exiled, that Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, made his long-awaited return. No longer the golden-maned sovereign of old, but now a Tarnished himself, stripped of the outer god's blessing and exiled to the desolate Badlands, he felt the undeniable pull of grace, a profound and guiding light that had once abandoned him, now beckoning him homeward. His journey back was not one of triumph, but of a weary warrior answering a forgotten call, a destiny rekindled by the very chaos he had been absent to prevent. The Badlands, a harsh and unforgiving expanse where he had honed his primal strength and wrestled with the beast within, served as his re-entry point, a stark reminder of his past and the raw power that still simmered beneath his weathered exterior. Upon his return, the once familiar landscape of the lands between was profoundly altered. The grandeur of the Golden Order, the very foundation of his former reign, lay in ruins. He learned of the shattering, a devastating civil war among Marika's demigod offspring, triggered by the destruction of the Elden Ring itself. This cataclysmic event, occurring during his prolonged exile, had torn the very fabric of reality, scattering the great runes and plunging the realm into an age of unending conflict and decay. The news must have struck him with a bitter irony, for the order he had helped establish had crumbled in his absence, a testament to the fragility of even divine decrees. More unsettling still was the revelation of Queen Marika's disappearance. The eternal sovereign, his former consort and the very vessel of the Elden Ring, was simply gone, leaving behind a void that no demigod, no matter how powerful, could fill. The Erd Tree, once a beacon of golden prosperity and the symbol of the Golden Order, stood wounded and fractured, its golden leaves falling like tears, its roots bleeding into the land, a stark metaphor for the broken state of the world. The Elden Ring, the source of all order and power, was shattered, its fragments, the great runes, now coveted by his own progeny, fueling their endless wars. This was not the lands between he had known, not the glorious empire he had helped forge. It was a dying world, a testament to the hubris and ambition of his descendants, and a stark challenge to his own forgotten legacy. Faced with this utter devastation, Godfrey the Tarnished felt a familiar resolve ignite within him. The call of grace was not merely a summons, but a mandate. He resolved to reclaim his rightful title as Elden Lord, not out of personal ambition, but out of a deep-seated desire to restore order to the lands between. His return was not for conquest, but for reclamation, a mission to mend what had been broken and to re-establish the Golden Order, or what remained of it. This was his purpose, his destiny, rekindled by the very chaos that had consumed his former kingdom. His journey was not solitary, however. As he traversed the blighted lands, he encountered others, fellow Tarnished, drawn back by the same guiding grace. These were the Tarnished of no renown, nameless, faceless exiles, once deemed unworthy, now chosen by the greater will to seek the Elden Ring. They were a diverse lot, some driven by greed, others by a sense of duty, but all united by the ethereal glow of grace that pointed them towards the fractured power of the Elden Ring. Godfrey, a figure of legendary stature, even in his tarnished state, observed these lesser Tarnished, perhaps seeing in them a reflection of his own forgotten past, a reminder that even the humblest of exiles could be chosen for greatness. He would not travel with them, for his path was his own, but their presence affirmed the overarching divine plan at play, a grand tapestry woven by the greater will itself. His quest for order led him first to Stormvale Castle, a formidable fortress perched atop a craggy peak, now under the tyrannical rule of Godric the Gravid. Godric, a descendant of Marika's lineage, a direct heir to the Golden lineage, had claimed one of the great runes, the very fragments of the shattered Elden Ring. Godfrey, the original patriarch of this lineage, approached the castle with a heavy heart, perhaps expecting to find a worthy, albeit flawed, successor. What he discovered, however, was a grotesque parody of his noble bloodline. Godric, in his desperate pursuit of power, had resorted to the abhorrent practice of grafting, surgically attaching the limbs of defeated warriors and even dragons to his own body, transforming himself into a multi-limbed monstrosity. This act of self-mutilation, a desperate attempt to acquire strength, was a profound insult to the purity and strength of the golden lineage, a perversion of the very essence of Marika's divine blood. Godfrey, a warrior of immense strength and honor, witnessed Godric's horrific transformation with a mixture of disgust and pity. This was not the strength of a true demigod, but the pathetic desperation of a weakling attempting to mimic power. In a climactic confrontation within the walls of Stormvale Castle, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, faced his descendant. The battle, though fierce, was ultimately a display of Godfrey's overwhelming power and Godric's desperate, yet ultimately futile attempts to cling to his stolen strength. Godfrey, despite his immense power, chose not to deliver a fatal blow. He spared Godric, a decision that speaks volumes about his character, perhaps a lingering sense of familial bond, or more likely a profound disdain for such a pathetic display of ambition. Yet his mercy was laced with contempt. He dismissed Godric as a pitiful shadow of the demigods he once knew, a pale imitation of the powerful, albeit flawed, beings he had fathered. The encounter served as a stark reminder of how far the golden lineage had fallen, a testament to the decay that had festered in his absence. Godric, though alive, was utterly humiliated, his pride shattered, his claim to greatness irrevocably undermined by the very patriarch of his lineage. Godfrey, having witnessed the depths of depravity to which his descendants had sunk, continued his journey, his resolve to restore true order only strengthened by this disheartening encounter. His path next led him to Leyndell, the royal capital, once the glorious heart of the Golden Order, now a city in ruins. The once pristine streets were choked with rubble, grand buildings lay crumbled, and the pervasive golden glow of the Erd tree had become a sickly, overgrown presence, its roots twisting and writhing through the very foundations of the city, a testament to the unchecked power of the greater will and the decay within its heart. The capital, a symbol of his former reign, now stood as a monument to its own demise, a stark reminder of the impermanence of even divine power. It was within these crumbling walls that Godfrey encountered Morgott, the veiled monarch. Morgott, a cursed omen, one of Marika's children born with the accursed horns of the omen, had long been hidden away, deemed unworthy of the golden lineage. Yet in the wake of the shattering, he had risen to defend the capital, proclaiming himself the last true heir, a staunch protector of the Erd tree and the remnants of the Golden Order. Morgott, despite his cursed birth, possessed an unwavering loyalty to the Golden Order and a fierce dedication to his mother Marika. He had, in essence, become the last bastion of a dying age, a tragic figure defending a throne that was already crumbling. Godfrey, the original Elden Lord, now faced his own son, a son he had likely never truly acknowledged, a son who now stood as the final guardian of the capital, a stark and poignant reflection of the fractured family he had left behind. This confrontation, unlike the one with Godric, would be a clash of titans, a battle between two powerful figures, both driven by a profound sense of duty, albeit to different and ultimately conflicting ideals. The stage was set for a truly momentous encounter, one that would further define Godfrey's arduous journey of reclamation. Morgott, the Omen King, still clung to his fractured loyalty, refusing to cede his position as the supposed last bastion of the Erd tree's defense. He recognized Godfrey, his estranged father, not as a returning king, but as another ambitious Tarnished seeking to usurp the throne. The air crackled with the weight of their shared history and divergent destinies as they prepared to clash beneath the ancient boughs of the Erd tree. Morgott, despite his cursed omen blood, had always striven to uphold Marika's will, even if that will now seemed irrevocably broken. He saw Godfrey's return not as a homecoming, but as a final desperate assault on what little remained of the Golden Order he so fiercely protected. His refusal was not merely defiance, it was a tragic manifestation of his lifelong devotion to a queen who had ultimately abandoned him, in a kingdom that had cast him aside. He believed with every fiber of his being that he was the only one capable of truly defending the Erdtree, even from its rightful king. Their battle was a maelstrom of raw power and desperate conviction. Morgott, wielding the accursed power of his Omen lineage, fought with a ferocity born of both duty and despair. His attacks, imbued with the grotesque magic of the omens, were a testament to the suffering he had endured and the strength he had forged in isolation. Godfrey, however, fought with the primal, unyielding might of a true warrior, his axe singing a song of war that echoed through the hallowed grounds. He met Morgott's cursed blood magic with pure, unadulterated strength, his blows capable of cleaving through stone and steel. The clash was a brutal dance between a father who had been exiled and a son who had been abandoned, each fighting for a different vision of the lands between. Morgott's omen blood, a mark of his cursed birth, manifested in devastating magical attacks, conjuring spectral weapons and blasts of dark energy. He fought with a desperate, almost suicidal bravery, throwing himself into the fray with no thought for his own preservation. Godfrey, for his part, fought with a measured yet overwhelming power, his every strike carrying the weight of his past victories and his unwavering resolve. He did not seek to destroy his son, but to overcome him, to prove his own rightful claim to the throne. The battle was a tragic spectacle, a clash of wills and bloodlines played out against the backdrop of a dying world. Ultimately, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, proved victorious. Morgott, weakened by his relentless defense of the Erdtree and the sheer power of his father, fell. Yet in his defeat, he earned Godfrey's respect. Godfrey recognized the unwavering loyalty and immense strength that had driven his son, even in the face of insurmountable odds. It was a poignant moment, a brief flicker of understanding between a father and son who had been separated by circumstance and destiny. Godfrey, though he had defeated Morgott, felt no triumph, only a quiet acknowledgement of his son's tragic devotion. He saw in Morgott a reflection of the unwavering loyalty that had once defined his own service to Marika, a loyalty that had ultimately led to his exile. Morgott's final moments were not of bitterness, but of a quiet, resigned acceptance, a testament to his lifelong, if misguided, dedication. He had fought for what he believed in, and in his defeat, he had earned the respect of the one man who truly understood the weight of a king's burden. Godfrey, in turn, recognized the tragic beauty of Morgott's sacrifice, a sacrifice made for a queen who had long since moved beyond his reach. With Morgott defeated, Godfrey pressed onward, his path to the Erdtree now seemingly clear. He ascended the golden roots, his heart set on reclaiming his rightful place as Elden Lord. However, upon reaching the colossal trunk, he found his path blocked by an impenetrable barrier, the thorns of the Erdtree, sealed by Radagon's magic. This was the same golden barrier that had thwarted countless other Tarnished, a final unyielding defense against any who would seek to mend the fractured Elden Ring. The thorns, glowing with an ethereal light, were a physical manifestation of Radagon's will, a testament to his power and his unwavering commitment to Marika's enigmatic plans. Godfrey, for all his strength, found himself momentarily stymied. The golden barrier was not something that could be simply cleaved with an axe, nor could it be bypassed by brute force. It was a magical seal, a testament to the intricate and often contradictory nature of the Golden Order's defenses. It was then that Godfrey began to piece together the true extent of the shattering and the convoluted history of the Golden Order. He learned of Radagon's merger with Marika, the two becoming one being, a revelation that explained the duality of the Elden Ring and the perplexing nature of its fractured state. He understood that Marika had not simply vanished, but had become intrinsically linked with Radagon, their wills intertwined, their destinies irrevocably bound. This merger, he realized, was not merely a union, but a profound transformation, a deliberate act that had reshaped the very fabric of the lands between. He also came to understand their combined role in the shattering, the deliberate act of breaking the Elden Ring, an act that had plunged the world into chaos. The revelation was a profound shock, a betrayal of everything he had once believed about his queen and the Golden Order. The queen he had served, the queen he had loved, had orchestrated the very calamity he had returned to mend. The implications of this merger were staggering. Marika, the goddess, and Radagon, the champion, were one, and their combined will had shattered the very order they were meant to uphold. This complex truth unveiled the deeper machinations behind the current state of the lands between, revealing a deliberate act of destruction rather than a mere accident. Faced with the impenetrable thorns, Godfrey, ever the pragmatist, considered a drastic measure. He sought out the flame of ruin, the forbidden fire of the giants, an ancient power capable of burning away the Erd tree's protective barrier. This was the same destructive flame that had been wielded by the fire giants of old, a power so immense it had been sealed away for millennia. He knew that other Tarnished had considered this path, a desperate gamble to bypass Radagon's seal and reach the Elden Ring. The flame of ruin, a power anathema to the Golden Order, represented a complete rejection of Marika's will, a willingness to burn away the old, to make way for the new. It was a dangerous proposition, one that could potentially destroy the very foundation of the lands between. But Godfrey, driven by his unwavering resolve to become Elden Lord, was prepared to take such a risk. He understood the gravity of such an act, the potential for irreversible destruction, but he also recognized the futility of other approaches. The Erd tree, once a symbol of life and prosperity, had become a prison, and drastic measures were required to break free. It was amidst this contemplation, this internal struggle between tradition and necessity, that Godfrey encountered you, the Tarnished protagonist. You, too, had navigated the treacherous paths of the lands between, defeated formidable demigods, and now stood at the precipice of becoming Elden Lord. Godfrey, with his keen warrior's eye, recognized you not merely as another Tarnished, but as a true rival, a contender for the very title he sought to reclaim. The air crackled with unspoken challenge, a silent acknowledgement of the shared ambition that had brought you both to this pivotal moment. He saw in you the same tenacity, the same unwavering determination that had defined his own journey. This encounter was not accidental. It was destiny, a final trial orchestrated by the very fabric of the lands between. He knew, with an instinct honed by countless battles, that only one of you could claim the mantle of Elden Lord, and that fate had brought you together for this ultimate confrontation. The two of you dueled at the base of the Erd tree, a battle that would determine the fate of the lands between. Godfrey, in his Hoarah Loux form, shed his regal pretense, embracing his primal warrior spirit. He fought with raw, untamed power, testing your worthiness, pushing you to your limits. This was not a battle of malice, but a trial by combat, a final assessment of your strength, your resolve, and your right to become Elden Lord. Every swing of his axe, every earth-shattering stomp was a question, a challenge to your claim. He sought to gauge your mettle, to see if you possess the unwavering conviction and unyielding power required to rule a shattered world. The fight was a testament to his own strength, a final glorious display of the warrior spirit that had defined his life. He pushed you to your absolute breaking point, demanding every ounce of your skill and determination. The battle was a symphony of steel and magic, a clash of two titans vying for the ultimate prize. He wanted to see if all you could withstand the full force of a true Elden Lord, if your ambition was matched by your capability. The duel was a crucible, forging the next Elden Lord in the fires of combat. Ultimately, Godfrey was slain in the battle, his mighty form crumbling to dust as his spirit returned to the Erdtree, a final poignant act of reintegration into the very essence of the lands between. Before his demise, however, he acknowledged your strength was a true warrior's respect for a worthy opponent. With his dying breath, he granted you his blessing, a final validation of your claim to the title of Elden Lord. His death was not a defeat, in the traditional sense, but a passing of the torch, a recognition that a new era had dawned. He had found his successor, a Tarnished strong enough to mend the fractured world. His spirit, now free from the burdens of ambition and exile, returned to the Erdtree, becoming one with the source of all life in the lands between. This final act solidified your claim, marking you as the chosen one, the one destined to reshape the fate of the world. Godfrey's death marked the definitive end of the Age of the Tarnished, a period of chaos and struggle, and ushered in the beginning of a new era under your rule, the protagonist. The lands between, once fractured and adrift, now had a new Elden Lord, a new guiding hand to lead it into an uncertain future. The old order had fallen, and a new one was poised to rise from its ashes. Your victory was not merely a personal triumph, but a pivotal moment in the history of the lands between, a turning point that would forever alter its destiny. The Age of the Tarnished, characterized by the scattered efforts of various champions, now concluded with the emergence of a single, unifying force. The path was now clear for you to claim the Elden Ring, to mend its fractures, and to forge a new future for the lands between, a future shaped by your choices and your vision. This marked the culmination of a grand narrative, the passing of power from the old guard to the new, a testament to the enduring cycle of life, death, and rebirth in the lands between. The very axe Godfrey wielded, now stained with the crimson of his final, glorious battle, is not merely discarded. It becomes, in the Age of the Tarnished, a potent relic, a tangible testament to his indomitable spirit and the legacy he forged through sheer, unyielding combat. This bloodied weapon, a silent witness to the ultimate clash between the first Elden Lord and the Tarnished protagonist, is a somber reminder of the price of ambition and the cyclical nature of power in the lands between. Its presence, perhaps in the hands of a collector or enshrined in a forgotten crypt, speaks volumes of the raw, visceral conflict that defined the twilight of Godfrey's journey. It is a symbol that transcends mere utility, embodying the very essence of his warrior's code and the brutal efficacy of his methods. The axe, steeped in the finality of his defeat, paradoxically elevates his legend, marking the precise moment where one era of lordship ended and another, born of the Tarnished's triumph, began to unfurl. It is a grim, beautiful artifact, echoing with the clang of steel and the roar of a demigod's last stand, forever etched into the collective memory of a world forever changed by its wielder. With Godfrey's fall, the mantle of leadership, once worn by the Golden Lineage, now passes to the Tarnished protagonist. This is not a simple transfer of power, but a profound shift in the very fabric of the lands between's destiny. The Tarnished, having overcome the ultimate challenge presented by the first Elden Lord, stands at a precipice, faced with a choice that will define the future. Will they restore the shattered Golden Order, attempting to mend the fractured remnants of Marika's vision and reestablish a semblance of the old ways, albeit under new stewardship? Or will they, emboldened by their journey and the lessons learned from the failures of past lords, forge an entirely new order, one perhaps free from the constraints and dogmas that ultimately led to the Lands Between's decay? This decision is not made lightly, for the echoes of Godfrey's reign, both its triumphs and its tragic conclusion, serve as a stark reminder of the immense responsibility that accompanies such power. The protagonist's choice, whether to embrace the familiar or venture into the unknown, is the ultimate consequence of Godfrey's final, desperate gamble, and it is a choice that will forever shape the trajectory of this fractured world. The weight of an entire realm, yearning for stability or craving radical change, rests squarely upon the shoulders of the Tarnished, who now stands as the undisputed heir to a legacy forged in both gold and blood. Godfrey's dramatic return to the Lands Between, culminating in his climactic battle and subsequent fall, is not merely an event. It is etched into the very annals of history as a pivotal, transformative moment. It marks the definitive end of an era, a final thunderous crescendo in the long, winding saga of the Golden Lineage. The memory of his arrival, a figure of myth made flesh, and his ultimate defeat at the hands of a Tarnished, resonates throughout the realm. Scholars will forever dissect his motivations, bards will sing of his final stand, and common folk will whisper tales of the warrior who returned from exile only to meet his end. This isn't just a battle, it's a turning point, a demarcation line between the age of the demigods and the nascent age of the Tarnished. His return, a desperate attempt to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, and his subsequent defeat, a testament to the evolving strength of the Tarnished, irrevocably alters the political and spiritual landscape of the Lands Between. It is a moment that redefines the very concept of lordship, demonstrating that even the mightiest, the first among Elden Lords, can be surpassed, their destiny shaped by forces they once sought to control. The reverberations of this event will continue to ripple through generations, influencing future leaders and shaping the collective consciousness of a world forever marked by Godfrey's final, glorious, and ultimately tragic act. Indeed, Godfrey's entire narrative, from his initial rise as Hoarah Loux to his ascension as the first Elden Lord, his exile, and his eventual return and demise, serves as a profound cautionary tale. It is a saga steeped in the perils of pride, the inescapable weight of legacy, and the relentless, cyclical nature of power within the Lands Between. His story warns against the dangers of an unyielding adherence to a single vision, even one as grand as the Golden Order. His unwavering belief in his own strength, while initially a source of triumph, ultimately blinds him to the shifting tides of destiny and the emergence of new, unforeseen challengers. The legacy he sought to uphold, the Golden Order, eventually became a gilded cage, trapping him in a cycle of conflict and ambition that he could not escape. His fall underscores the immutable truth that even the most formidable power is transient, destined to be challenged, tested, and ultimately superseded. The cycle of rise and fall, of triumph and defeat, is an inherent characteristic of the Lands Between, a truth that Godfrey, despite his immense power, could not defy. His tale is a stark reminder that even the most revered figures are susceptible to the same human flaws, and that the pursuit of power, unchecked by humility and adaptability, can lead to inevitable downfall. It is a lesson etched in the very landscape of the Lands Between, a testament to the ephemeral nature of even the most enduring reigns. In the wake of Godfrey's final defeat, the remnants of his loyal followers, the formidable Crucible Knights, are left adrift, their once unwavering purpose now shattered.